hey, that's my dad.
Young man, you get off that bed and get to work. After you clean out the stable, you can build some new steps for the back porch. While I work 72 hours a week, no son of mine is going to loaf.
72 hours?
12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Tomorrow morning, young
Finally,
man,
some
you're
sound.
going out to get a regular job. You can work too, and earn your keep.
Not so good, Ken? Well, let's try another picture. Say about 50 years ago.
Oh, hello, son. Well, say, I've got some new pictures for the stereoscope. We'll look at them tonight. Don't forget about your chores. Have them all done by the time I'm through work. And keep the wood box full.
Boy, how long will you work, Dad?
Let's go. It just took
Why,
10
10
minutes
hours.
of troubleshooting.
10 hours a day, every day except Sunday.
60
Look at-
hours a week? Boy.
Well, Ken, let's take a look at your father's time as it really is today.
Hi, Dad. You sure don't work as long hours as they used to.
As
That's right,
as I
Ken.
finished a bis
It's a
12 to
wonderful thing
3.
to be able to do so much work in so little time. This 40-hour week suits me fine. And some people even work shorter hours nowadays. But by the way, Ken, how would you like to play a quick round of golf before supper? I think we can work it in. And then later I'd like to shellac that new bookcase I'm making.
Well, Ken?
Yes, Dad does enjoy his leisure time. And to think that a few years ago, people didn't have nearly so much time to themselves.
Yes, we've gained a lot of leisure time in the last century or so. All of us.
Wait a minute. All of us? Mother should hear you.
That was not a good transition. I'm still working on that. It could have
Hello.
been worse though. Hello. Could have been worse though. Oh, you shouldn't see that. Shit. There. Oh God. I had chat working just fine a moment ago, and then it stopped working fine. I just don't know what to do about that. I could try to get it working. Risk it dying and all. Could do that. Shall I do that? I'm going to risk it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to have it.
Can you get your volume up a bit?
No problem. My volume. Alright.
Reading stream.
Yeah. Reading stream today, everyone. Hello. I'm Charis Euphranor. You know who I am? If you don't, that's would be better, honestly. We're
Mic
going
audio
to
is a bit
read
low.
today. Got a bit low, okay. So I raised it a little bit. Should be better now, right? It's also because I haven't been talking in a while. Hope it makes sense. This is so hard. You guys, you don't know how hard the life is, man. You know. God. Okay. Here's a pro gamer move. If it crashes my stream, I'm going to have to restart it and try again. That's all the sense it would make, really. Mic audio should be fine now. If it's not, please let me know. Let's. Okay, close your eyes for a second. All right, just close your eyes for 1 second. God, oh, it's terrible.
I didn't know a PDF was as hard on your computer as Elden Ring.
I know, right? I didn't know either.
Librarian been accumulating yap power and now we get a pure word stream.
I mean, I've been accumulating some time. I've come back. I'm sorry that this stream is less of a chat stream and more of a I'm just gonna read a PDF stream, but I suppose this is an accurate reflection of the postgraduate life. Okay, so the chat should kind of work now, and it should look a little different. And the reason it looks a little different is because I'm still fixing things, and one of the things I'm still trying to fix is how the how you see everything. So the good news of that is, barring, sorry, or should I say it rather, yeah, barring a few crashes, ignoring that I have to restart my application about 5 times, you can see the intro again. You can, so it's not really, it's less
Wait,
of an improvement.
This streamer is librarian doing his assignment live.
Well, it's not exactly doing the assignment. It's more so something I wanted to read, and I never really had the time to read. And it's really just reading. There's nothing special about it. And so I thought, well, I've been a librarian of Alexandria and a philosopher VTuber for a month now, and I'm the only one. I should probably lead by example and actually read philosophy, at least. At least some philosophy, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get right down into doing it. Let me see if I can just zoom in on this. I can't. That sucks. So I don't know how it looks. Probably pretty bad, but it's fine. You don't really have to see it super clearly. There's a stream chat there to the side. I could hide it if it's distracting. Tell me if it's distracting. I'm going to shut Parrot up for the remainder of the stream, probably. We can catch up now. If there's anything to talk about that you guys would like to chat to me for, we can do so now before I begin. But overall, the flow of the stream is just going to be I'm reciting a wall of text out loud and occasionally thinking about it. Occasionally.
Librarian bringing groundbreaking invention to the news generation, calls it actually reading a book for once.
I hope I'm the only VTuber that's ever done this. I hope. I'm probably not the only VTuber who's ever read anything, but I'm probably the only VTuber who's read philosophy. Or tried to, at least. Maybe I just be able to, but you know, of all the talk of how great and mighty Søren Kierkegaard is, I've never actually done anything with him on the stream, and so this is the first thing I want to do. It's read the present age. Sorry, before we begin, is there anything I want to say? Yeah.
Any stream schedule for the week or still going to be whenever? No pressure, just curious when the next Tears of the Kingdom stream will be.
Yeah, so, sorry for no streams last week. Busy. Life is such as such it is. But this week is also gonna be a little hectic, because there are things to do, and I don't like to have to do them, but I do. I won't quite be able to tell you guys, to give you guys a schedule for the stream, because I'm not sure how the weekend will resolve. What I can say is, well, here's today's stream, and I'm going to try to stream tomorrow, too. Then, yeah, I'll probably just be reading something else tomorrow as well. Maybe, I don't know.
No worries.
And then in the weekend, maybe there will be a Tears of the Kingdom.
Especially with Bird not helping, must be tough.
Oh yeah, Bird is not helpful at all. But, and especially given that, right? Let me just... Alright, okay. Yeah, so, stream today. Good stream tomorrow.
VTuber regrets.
The rest of the week, probably not so much. I might be able to get a stream in on Sunday. It's the next earliest day I'll be able to get a stream in, probably. If you want to talk to me, then Lamau, wait till then, I guess. If beyond that, yeah, not much planned further ahead. I will say that next week is Fire Emblem Three Houses week, probably. Oh yeah, oh shit, okay. So it's the 5th anniversary of Fire Emblem Three Houses, so I'm probably gonna play that. That's probably what I'm gonna do. That's in terms of games. So I think it's gonna be that, and then maybe at some point I'll do another Tears of the Kingdom stream, and then more yapping as scheduled. Is there anything new and special planned upcoming? Not exactly, because I'm dying and this dissertation isn't gonna write itself. But I'll still be here and around. It's just not much innovation here, unfortunately. But I think you're all used to that. So without further ado, let us read Søren Kierkegaard's The Present Age. Alright, Parrot, that's enough speaking from you. I can get you out of the way. Oh shit, hold on. Let me just get one more thing. Try to read chat better. I hope this doesn't crash my stream. Tell me if the stream crashes, guys. And tell me if the music's too loud as well, because right now the music is like a teensy bit loud for me, but I can always adjust it on my end. Whereas I'm not sure how it will work on your guys' end, so let me know if it is fine. Or if it's not fine. Okay. Cool. I can't read. I'm sorry. What a mess. Okay. Charis Euphranor, librarian, computer, beat Elden Ring, but could beaten by a philosophy PDF. It's just the power of it, you know what I mean? Alright. We can start reading now. We can start reading. Can we start reading? We can start reading now. So, this is The Present Age by Søren Kierkegaard. It's part of a book review that he did back in the day. And I believe the whole book... He released the book in response to another book he read, and that became the book. It was the book review. And the... I'm trying to just give you the skip all the details and just get the essence of it, right? He was giving feedback to a novel, and he didn't quite like it. And part of his response was to illustrate why he didn't like it, and to do that, he had to explain the state of the world. That's what you do when you're a philosophy major and you're trying to give feedback, is eventually you explain your frustrations by just committing yourself to an entire framework of how the world works, and you just go from there, right? And so this is part of a series of texts. It's not in itself the full text. There is some context, but we're just going to read this bit. In the meantime, the present age bit, because it's good in isolation, I think. And also a nice jumping off point from all the Kierkegaard talk. If it makes no sense, that's fine. That's just how philosophy is. If it makes too much sense, perhaps you should consult a physician. Alright, let's begin. Our age is essentially one of understanding and reflection, without passion, momentarily bursting into enthusiasm, and shrewdly relapsing into repose. If we had a statistical table, the consumption of intelligence from generation to generation, as we have for spirits, You should be astounded at the enormous amount of scruple and deliberation consumed by small, well-to-do families living quietly, and at the amount which the young and even children use. For just as the children's crusade may be said to typify the Middle Ages, precocious children are typical of the present age. In fact, one is tempted to ask whether there is a single man left ready, for once, to commit an outrageous folly. Nowadays, not even a suicide kills himself in desperation. Before taking the step, he deliberates so long and so carefully that he literally chokes with thought. It is even questionable whether he ought to be called a suicide, since it is really thought which takes his life. He does not die with deliberation, but from deliberation. It would therefore be very difficult to prosecute the present generation in view of its legal quibbles. In fact, its ability, virtuosity, and good sense consists in trying to reach a judgment and a decision without ever going as far as action. If one may say of the revolutionary period that it runs wild, one would have to say of the present that it runs badly. Between them, the individual and his generation always brings each other to a standstill, with the result that the prosecuting attorney would find it next to impossible to get any fact admitted, because nothing really happens. To judge from innumerable indications, one would conclude that something quite exceptional had either just happened or was just about to happen. Yet, any such conclusion would be quite wrong. Indications are, indeed, the only achievements of the age, and its skill and inventiveness, constructing fascinating illusions, its burst of enthusiasm, using as a deceitful escape some projected change of form, must be rated as high in the scale of cleverness and of the negative use of strength as the passionate, creative energy of the revolution, the corresponding scale of energy. But the present generation, wearied by its chimerical efforts, relapses into complete indolence. Its condition is that of a man who has only fallen asleep towards morning, first of all from great dreams, and a feeling of laziness, finally a witty or clever excuse for remaining in bed. No, this is not ASMR. Maybe I'll need to interrupt the stream with loud noises. Just the occasional scraping of the microphone. It is good if you fall asleep to this though, because you don't have to understand and read it all at the first time. That's my tip with philosophy, is like, just read it 10 times and let yourself sleep to it the first 5 times at least, because like then it just kind of like you don't have to actively absorb it like immediately right now, as opposed to a lot of other concepts. I think philosophical concepts are best done through this sort of passive way, and if it helps to have someone read it out for you, because I know that helped for me, then I can do that too. Let's continue. However well-meaning and strong the individual man may be, if he could only use his strength, he still has not the passion to be able to tear himself from the coils and seductive uncertainty of reflection. Nor do his surroundings supply the events or produce the general enthusiasm necessary in order to free him. Instead of coming to his help, his milieu forms around him a negative intellectual opposition, which struggles for a moment with a deceptive prospect, only to deceive him in the end by pointing to a brilliant way out of the difficulty, by showing him that the shrewdest thing of all is to do nothing. For at the bottom of the tergiversation, I don't know how to read that word, of the present age, I probably should have researched the words before I read them, but I'm sorry, is the inertia. And everyone without passion congratulates himself upon being the inertia. Upon being the first to discover it. I'm bad at reading, in case you didn't know. And so becomes cleverer still. During the revolution, arms were distributed freely, just as during the Crusades the insignia of the exploit were bestowed upon men. But nowadays people are supplied with rules of careful conduct and ready reckoners to facilitate judgment. If a generation were given the diplomatic task of postponing any action in such a way as to make it seem as if something were just about to happen, then we should have to admit that our age had performed as remarkable a feat as the revolutionary age. Let anyone try forgetting all he knows of the age and its actual relativity, which is so enhanced by familiarity, and then arrive, as it were, from another world. If he were then to read a book or an article in the papers, or merely to speak to some passerby, his impression would be, "Good heavens, something is going to happen tonight," or perhaps something happened the night before last. A revolutionary age is an age of action. Ours is the age of advertisement and publicity. Nothing ever happens, but there is immediate publicity everywhere. In the present age, a rebellion is, of all things, the most unthinkable. Such an expression of strength would seem ridiculous to the calculating intelligence of our times. On the other hand, a political virtuoso might bring off a feat almost as remarkable. He might write a manifesto suggesting a general assembly at which people should decide upon a rebellion, and it would be so carefully worded that even the censor will let it pass. The meeting itself, he would be able to create the impression that his audience had rebelled, after which they would all go quietly home, having spent a very pleasant evening. Among the young men of today, profound and prodigious learning is almost unthinkable. They would find it ridiculous. On the other hand, scientific virtuoso might draw up a subscription form outlining an all-embracing system, which he proposed to write, and what is more, in such a way that the reader would feel he had already read the system. At the age of encyclopedists, when men wrote gigantic folios with unremitting pains, is gone. Now is the turn of those lightweight encyclopedists who, passant, deal with all the sciences and the whole of existence. Equally unthinkable among the young men of today is a truly religious renunciation of the world, adhered to with daily self-denial. On the other hand, almost any theological student is capable of something far more wonderful. He could found a society with the sole object of saving all those people who are lost. The age of great and good actions is past. The present is the age of anticipation, when even recognition is received in advance. No one is satisfied with doing something definite. Everyone wants to feel flattered by reflection. The illusion of having discovered at the very least a new continent. Like a young man who decides to work for his examination in all earnest from September 1st, and in order to strengthen his resolution, decides to take a holiday during August. So, the present generation seems. Though this is decidedly more difficult to understand, to have made a solemn resolution that the next generation should set to work seriously. And in order to avoid disturbing or delaying the next generation, the present attends to the banquets. Only there is a difference. The young man understands himself in the lightheartedness of youth, whereas our generation is serious, even at banquets. Fish and chips, yes sir. Current day is live service, not Minecraft. Terradido asked. Good question. I'm unsure how to answer it. At least so far. For what exactly he's getting at. So what's interesting is he wrote of a present age, not in this age. He wrote of the present age like hundreds of years ago. And yet it strikes familiar somewhat. We can see the evolution of it at least, and how it's bring about our current age. But, you know, although there are some cases, or some bits of it that seems like it's being written by a man out of our time, there are some that seem to be written during our time, which is just fascinating. Is it a Minecraft server? I don't know. I don't think so, though. I don't think that's what he was getting at exactly. Oh, I think I like this paragraph, this next one. There is no more action or decision in our day than there is perilous delight in swimming in shallow waters. But just as a grown-up, struggling delightedly in the waves, calls to those younger than himself, "Come on, jump in quickly." The decision in existence, so to speak, of course it is in the individual, calls out to the young who are not as yet worn out by over-reflective thought, or overburdened by the illusions of reflective thought. Come on, leap cheerfully, even if it means a light-hearted leap. So long as it is decisive. If you are capable of being a man, then danger and the harsh judgment of existence on your thoughtlessness will help you to become one. This was good. This is a visualization really helps me get the point more. If the jewel which every one desired to possess lay far out on a frozen lake, where the ice was very thin, watched over by the danger of death, while closer in, the ice was perfectly safe, then in a passionate age, the crowds would applaud the courage of the man who ventured out. They would tremble for him, and with him in the danger of his decisive action, they would grieve over him if he were drowned. They would make a god of him if he secured the prize. But in an age without passion, in a reflective age, it would be otherwise. People would think each other clever, and agreeing that it was unreasonable, and not even worthwhile to venture so far out. And in this way, they would transform daring and enthusiasm into a feat of skill, so as to do something, for after all, something must be done. The crowds would go out to watch from a safe place, and with the eyes of connoisseurs appraise the accomplished skater, who could skate almost to the very edge, i.e., as far as the ice was still safe and the danger have not yet begun, and then turn back. The most accomplished skater would manage to go out to the furthermost point, and then perform a still more dangerous-looking run, so as to make the spectators hold their breath and say, "Ye gods, how mad! He is risking his life!" But look, and you will see that his skill was so astonishing that he managed to turn back just in time while the ice was perfectly safe and there was still no danger. As at the theater, the crowd would applaud and acclaim him, surge homeward with the heroic artist in their midst to honor him with a magnificent banquet. For intelligence has got the upper hand to such an extent that it transforms the real task into an unreal trick, and reality into a play. During the banquet, admiration would reach its height. Now, proper relation between the admirer and the object of admiration is one in which the admirer is edified by the thought that he is a man like the hero, humbled by the thought that he is incapable of such great actions, yet morally encouraged to emulate him according to his powers. But where intelligence has got the upper hand, the character of admiration is completely altered. Even at the height of the banquet, when the applause was loudest, the admiring guests would all have a shrewd notion that the action of the man who received all the honor was not really so extraordinary, and that only by chance was the gathering for him, since after all, with a little practice, every one could have done as much. Briefly, instead of being strengthened in their discernment and encouraged to do good, the guests would more probably go home with an even stronger predisposition to the most dangerous, if also the most respectable, of all diseases, to admire in public what is considered unimportant in private, since everything made into a joke. And so, stimulated by a gush of admiration, they are all comfortably agreed they might just as well admire themselves. Ooh, that was a great. Love this bit. I change from fearing what might and not what is led to a society that puts the results of today, makes the work appear in the future and or past, but all remains illusionary. That's an interesting read of it, I think, yes. Of at least of the first bit. So I think it's a little. I think it reaches a bit further into. I think it reaches a little further beyond just the gap between what appears to be and what is. I think there's something further in there, but I'm not quite sure what that is yet. But I think that's a good initial reading of the first few pages. Kind of sounds like YouTube pranksters, maybe, maybe. All right. But yeah, I really like. Oh, I like. Really like the lake analogy. I read about, I think what going in. I haven't read this. This is the first time I'm reading this, by the way. And the only thing I knew of this prior to this reading now is the lake analogy, and I thought it was really. Formerly, it was agreed that a man stood or fell by his actions. Nowadays, on the contrary, everyone idles about and comes off brilliantly with the help of a little reflection, knowing perfectly well what ought to be done. But what two people talking together, or the speakers at a meeting, understand perfectly presented to them as a thought or as an observation, they cannot understand it all in the form of action. If same one were to overhear what people said ought to be done, and then in a spirit of irony, and for no other reason, proceeded to act accordingly, everyone would be amazed. They would find it rash, yet as soon as they had talked it over, they would find that it was just what should be done. The present age, with its sudden enthusiasms, followed by apathy and indolence, is very near the comic. But those who understand the comic see quite clearly that the comic is not where the present age imagines. Now, satire, if it is to do a little good and not cause immeasurable harm, must be firstly based upon a consistent ethical view of life. Shit, sorry, I think I read that wrong. Oh wait, no, I didn't. Okay. It was firmly based upon a consistent ethical view of life. A natural distinction which renounces the success of the moment. Otherwise, the cure will be infinitely worse than the disease. The really comic thing is that an age such as this should try to be witty and humorous, for that is most certainly the last and most acrobatic way out of the impasse. What indeed is there for an age of reflection and thought to defy with humor? For, being without passion, it has lost all feeling for the values of Eros, for enthusiasm and sincerity in politics and religion, or for piety, admiration and domesticity in everyday life. But even if the vulgar laugh, life only mocks at the wit which knows no values. To be witty without possessing the riches of inwardness is like squandering money upon luxuries and dispensing with necessities. Or, as the proverb says, like selling one's breeches to buy a wig. But an age without passion has no values, and everything is transformed into representational ideas. Thus, there are certain remarks and expressions current which, though true and reasonable up to a point, are lifeless. On the other hand, no hero, no lover, no thinker, no knight of the faith, no proud man, no man in despair would claim to have experienced them completely and personally. Just as one longs for the clink of real money after the crackle of banknotes, one longs nowadays for a little originality. Yet what is more spontaneous than wit? It is more spontaneous, at least more surprising even than the first bud of spring, the first tender shoots of grain. Why even, if spring carn? According to agreement, it would still be spring, but wit upon agreement would be disgusting. Now, supposing that as a relief from feverish and sudden enthusiasms, things went so far that wit, that divine accident, an additional favor which comes as a sign from the gods, from the mysterious source, the inexplicable, so that not even the wittiest of men dares to say, tomorrow, but adoringly says, when it pleases the gods. But supposing that wit were to be transformed into its shabbiest contrary, a trivial necessity, so that it became a profitable branch of trade to manufacture and make up and remake, and buy up old and new witticisms. What an epigram on a witty age. In the end, therefore, money will be the one thing people will desire, which is moreover only a representative, an abstraction. Nowadays, a young man hardly envies anyone his gifts, his art, the love of a beautiful girl, or his fame. He only envies him his money. Give me money, he will say, and I am saved. But the young man will not run riot. He will not deserve what repentance repays. He would die with nothing to reproach himself with. And under the impression that if only he had the money, he might really have lived and might even have achieved something great. Ooh, ain't that the truth? Wow. That's good. I like that. I really do. Hey, that was good. Also feels like he's calling me out. That if only I had money, maybe I could achieve something great. I don't know. He's calling out my illusions. Those uncomfortable things I hide deep within myself. Maybe to you too. That's the vibe I get from this so far, is Kierkegaard is not pulling punches. He's definitely not trying to make you very comfortable. I think I am, and I think that kind of offsets the discomfort he's trying to sow. It's kind of going around in an interesting way. Alright, let's continue. After these general observations, and having compared the present age with the revolutionary age, it will be in order to go back to the dialectical and categorical definitions of the present age, regardless whether they are present at a given moment or not. We are concerned here with the how of the age, and this how must be defined from a universal standpoint, the final consequences of which can be reached by a deduction, a posse ad esse, and verified by observation and experience ad esse ad posse. As far as its significance is concerned, it is, of course, possible that the work of reflection, which is the task before the present age, may ultimately be explained in a higher form of existence. As for its quality, there is no doubt that the individual resting in his reflection can be just as well intentioned as a passionate man who has made his decision. And conversely, there may be just as much excuse for the man whose passion run away with him, as for a man whose fault is never apparent, though he is cleverly aware that he gets himself deceived by his reflection. The results of reflection are both dangerous and unforeseeable, because one can never tell whether the decision which saves a man from evil is reached after thorough consideration, or whether it is simply the exhaustion resulting from reflection which prevents him from doing wrong. One thing, however, is certain. An increased power of reflection, like an increased knowledge, only adds to man's affliction. And above all, it is certain that for the individual as for the generation, no task is more difficult to escape from the temptations of reflection, simply because they are so dialectical, and the result of one clever discovery may give the whole question a new turn. Because at any moment, reflection is capable of explaining everything quite differently and allowing one some way of escape. Because at the last moment of a reflective decision, reflection is capable of changing everything, after one has made far greater exertions than are necessary to get a man of character into the midst of things. But these are only the excuses of reflection, and the real position in reflection remains unchanged, for it is only altered within reflection. Even if a certain injustice is done to the present age, when it is compared to a complete and closed period, the present age is still struggling with all the difficulty of becoming. Such a qualification is only a reflective qualification. And then in return, its uncertainty is filled hope. Nietzsche also said something like the world was more Dionysian and now it is stiflingly repressed. No? Yeah, I think, which is so interesting because Kierkegaard is such a, he's such a Christian, and Nietzsche is such an aggressive, he's aggressively atheist, that their divide, them being able to kind of see the world in some way similarly, at least in their diagnosis of it, is very telling, I think, to me. At least those are the two thinkers I really enjoy. My interpretations of those thinkers I would like to add, because some people like to say that I read Nietzsche wrong. Beef between librarians is great. I love it. Anyways. A passionate, tumultuous age will overthrow everything, pull everything down, but a revolutionary age, that is at the same time reflective and passionless, transforms that expression of strength into a feat, dialectics. It leaves everything standing, but cunningly empties it of significance. Instead of it culminating in a rebellion, it reduces the inward reality of all relationships to a reflective tension which leaves everything standing, but makes the whole of life ambiguous. So that everything continues to exist factually, whilst by a dialectical deceit, privatissime, it supplies a secret interpretation that it does not exist. Ooh. Secret interpretation that it doesn't exist. Okay. Morality is character. Character is that which is engraved. But the sand and the sea have no character, and neither has abstract intelligence, for character is reality inwardness. Immorality as energy is also character. But to be neither moral nor immoral is merely ambiguous. And ambiguity enters into life when the qualitative distinctions are weakened by a gnawing reflection. The revolt of the passions is elemental. The dissolution brought about by ambiguity is a silent sorority. There's a footnote here, a form of sophism, leading by gradual steps from truth to absurdity. Ooh. Let me read that again. The revolt of the passions is elemental. The dissolution brought about by ambiguity is a silent sororities. Whatever that word is pronounced. That goes on night and day. The distinction between good and evil is enervated by a superficial, superior, and theoretical knowledge of evil, and by a supercilious cleverness which is aware that goodness is neither appreciated nor worthwhile in this world, that it is tantamount to stupidity. No one is any longer carried away by the desire for the good to perform great things. No one is precipitated by evil into atrocious sins, and so there is nothing for either the good or the bad to talk about. And yet, for that very reason, will gossip all the more. Since ambiguity is tremendously stimulating, and much more verbose than rejoicing over goodness or repentance over evil. The springs of life, which are not only what they are because of the qualitative differentiating power of passion, lose their elasticity. The distance separating a thing from its opposite, in quality no longer regulates the inward relation of things. All inwardness is lost, and to that extent the relation no longer exists, or else forms a colorless cohesion. The negative law is this. Opposites are unable to dispense with each other and unable to hold together. Positive law, that they are able to dispense with each other, unable to hold together, or, stated positively, opposites are unable to dispense with each other because of the connection between them. But when the inward relation is wanting, another takes its place. A quality is no longer related to its contrary, instead the partners both stand and observe each other, and the state of tension thus produced is really the end of the relationship. For example, the admirer no longer cheerfully and happily acknowledges greatness, promptly expressing his appreciation and then rebelling against its pride and arrogance. Nor is the relationship in any sense the opposite. The admirer and this object of admiration stand like two polite equals and observe each other. The subject no longer freely honors his king or is angered at his ambition. To be a subject has come to mean something quite different. It means to be a third party. The subject ceases to have a position within the relationship. He has no direct relation to the king, but simply becomes an observer and deliberately works out the problem, i.e. the relation of a subject to his king. For a time, committee after committee is formed. So long, that is to say, as there are still people who passionately want to be what they ought to be. But in the end, the whole age becomes a committee. A father no longer curses his son in anger, using all his parental authority, nor does a son defy his father, a conflict which might end in the inwardness of forgiveness. On the contrary, the relationship is irreproachable, for it is really in process of ceasing to exist, since they are no longer related to one another within relationship. In fact, it has become a problem in which the two partners observe each other as in a game, instead of having any relation to each other, and they note down each other's remarks instead of showing a firm devotion. More and more people renounce the quiet, modest tasks of life that are so important and pleasing to God in order to achieve something greater, in order to think over the relationships of life in a higher relationship till, in the end, the whole generation has become a representation. Who represent? It is difficult to say who. Who represent? It is difficult to say who. And who think about these relationships, for whose sake it is not easy to discover. A disobedient youth is no longer in fear of his schoolmaster. The relation is rather one of indifference, in which schoolmaster and pupil discuss how a good school should be run. To go to school no longer means to be in fear of the master or merely to learn, but rather implies being interested in the problem of education. Again, the differentiating relation of man to woman is never broken in an audaciously licentious manner. Decency is observed in such a way that one can only describe these innocent borderline flirtations as trivial. Now that's interesting. I'm not sure if he's cooking here. I'm not sure if I agree with what he's saying in this paragraph. That I think he identifies something, and that is rather than this sort of old age that he writes about, where there is an authority who imparts knowledge and teaches the youth. It's slowly becoming more equalized, and that, you know, the relationship is no longer that which is like a teacher teaching. It's more just them cooperating to work on the problem of education. I think that is sort of sensical. But I think he paints this in, or rather, this is to foreshadow what he's gonna go on ahead further to do, of course. But I think right now what he's cooking here is to try to imbue passion into a system of a higher of an upper and lower of a teacher and a student, which I half agree with personally. I feel like let me go back to the quote. Where is it? Yeah, a disobedient youth is no longer in fear. The relation is rather one of indifference. It implies just being interested in the problem of education, and he distinguishes that from learning. And I don't necessarily think I agree there. I think that it being indifferent is a good observation, and one I agree with is something that implicitly should be admonished, should be discouraged, right? Is what he's getting at. I agree with the discouraging apathy bit, but I'm not sure I agree with the equalizing the field being bad. But we'll see. We'll let him cook. We'll let him cook. What in fact should one call such relationships? Attention, I think, is the best description, not, however, attention which strains the forces to breaking point, but rather attention which exhausts life itself and the fire of that enthusiasm and inwardness, which makes the fetters of dependence and the crown of dominion light, which makes the child's obedience, the father's authority joyful, the admiration of the subject and the exaltation of the great fearless, which gives recognized importance to the master and thus to the disciple occasion to learn, which unites woman's weakness and man's strength in the equal strength of devotion, as it is the relationships still exist, but they lack the force, makes it possible for them to draw together in inwardness and unite in harmony. The relationship expresses its presence and its absence simultaneously, not completely, but rather as though it were drawled out, half awake and uninterruptedly. Hugo was, you have to bear in mind that at the time, this was pretty progressive. Now that he mentions it here, I think it's interesting to think about that. I believe from what I know of him, his idea on women was generally that, although he still harbored some things that were less, like, that were products of his time, understandings of women, perhaps more conservatively, he also had a sort of progressive understanding that under God we were all equal, which is interesting. Not much to comment on there, as you know. You already know what I think. Let's move on. Perhaps I can explain what I mean by a very simple illustration. I once knew a family who owned a grandfather clock whose works, for some reason or other, had gotten out of order. But the fault did not result in the spring suddenly unwinding, or in the chain breaking, or in the hand ceasing to strike. On the contrary, it went on striking in a curiously abstract, though confusing way. It did not strike 12 times at 12 o'clock and once at 1 o'clock, but struck once all through the day at regular intervals. It went on striking all day long, but never gave a definite time. The same applies to a state of exhausted tension. The relationship continues. Something is expressed with an abstract continuity which prevents any real break. But although it must nevertheless be described as an expression of the relationship is not only ambiguously expressed, it is almost meaningless. It is this deceptive lull in the relationship which continues the relation as a fact. The danger is that it favors the cunning deprivations of reflection. Against a rebellion, one can use force, and an obvious counter of it is only to wait for its punishment. But dialectical complications are difficult to root out, and it requires even better ears to track down the stealthy movement of reflection along its secret and ambiguous path. The established order of things continues to exist, but it is its ambiguity which satisfies our reflective and passionless age. No one, for example, wishes to do away with the power of the king, but if little by little it could be transformed into something purely fictitious, everyone would be quite prepared to cheer him. No one, for example, wishes to bring about the downfall of the eminent. But if distinction could be shown to be purely fictitious, then everyone would be prepared to admire it. In the same way, people are quite prepared to leave the Christian terminology untouched, but they can surreptitiously interpolate that it involves no decisive thought. And so they remain unrepentant, for after all they have destroyed nothing. They no more desire a powerful king than an heroic liberator or religious authority. In all innocence, they want the established order to continue, but they have the more or less certain reflective knowledge that it no longer exists. When they proudly imagine that their attitude is ironical, as though real irony were not essentially a concealed enthusiasm in a negative age, just as the hero is enthusiasm made manifest in a positive age, as though irony did not involve sacrifice when its greatest master was put to death. Ooh, that's a reference, by the way, to everyone here who may not be too aware, an overt reference to Socrates, who Kierkegaard regarded as the master of irony and one of his teachers. Like, a lot of my favorite interpretations of Socrates actually are Kierkegaard's interpretations. So he's paying tribute to his goat. This passage here. This reflective tension ultimately constitutes itself into a principle, and just as in a passionate age enthusiasm is the unifying principle, so in an age which is very reflective and passionless, envy is the negative, unifying principle. This must not, however, be interpreted as an ethical charge. The idea of reflection is, if one may so express it, envy, and it is therefore twofold in its action. It is selfish within the individual, and it results in the selfishness of the society around him, which thus works against him. The envy in reflection within the individual prevents him making a decision passionately. If, for a moment, it should seem as though an individual were about to succeed in throwing off the yoke of reflection, he is at once pulled up by the opposition of the reflection which surrounds him. The envy, which springs from reflection, imprisons man's will and his strength. First of all, the individual has to break loose from the bonds of his own reflection, but even then he is not free. Instead, he finds himself in a vast prison, formed by the reflection of those around him, for because of his relation to his own reflection, he also has a certain relation to the reflection around him. He can only escape from this second imprisonment through the inwardness of religion, no matter how clearly he may perceive the falseness of the situation. With every means in its power, reflection prevents people from realizing that both the individual and the age are thus imprisoned. Not imprisoned by tyrants, or priests, or nobles, or the secret police, but by reflection itself. And it does so by maintaining the flattering and conceited notion that the possibility of reflection is far superior to a mere decision. A selfish envy makes such demands upon the individual that by asking too much, it prevents him from doing anything. It spoils him like an indulgent mother, for the envy within him prevents the individual from devoting himself to others. Moreover, the envy which surrounds him, and in which he participates by envying others, is envious in a negative and critical sense. People, both the individual and the age, are imprisoned by What is it that he says here? By reflection itself. We are imprisoned by reflection, and that we are deceived by the notion that the possibility of reflection is better than mere decision. We are deceived by that, is what he's writing here. And we've come to understand that thinking is, at least this is my reading of it first time around, is always better. Thinking of what can be done is better than actually doing. Wow, that is, I can see it. I think that's, he's cooking here. Here he's cooking. I like this. Okay. But the further it is carried, the more clearly does the envy of reflection become a moral resentment. Just as air in a sealed space becomes poisonous, so the imprisonment of reflection develops a culpable resentment if it is not ventilated by action or incident of any kind. In reflection, the state of strain, or tension as we called it, results in the neutralization of all the higher powers, and all that is low and despicable comes to the fore. Its very impudence giving the spurious effect of strength, while protected by its very baseness, it avoids attracting the attention of resentment. Well, that's such a cool piece of imagery there. Just as air in a sealed space becomes poisonous, so the imprisonment of reflection develops a culpable resentment if it is not ventilated by action. Oh, okay. Sorry, these few paragraphs got me kind of shook, as the kids say. I like this. Have some water. Let me hydrate. Everyone please hydrate as well. It is a fundamental truth of human nature that man is incapable of remaining permanently on the heights, of continuing to admire anything. Human nature needs variety. Even in the most enthusiastic ages, people have always liked to joke enviously about their superiors. That is perfectly in order and is entirely justifiable, so long as after having laughed at the great, they can once more look upon them with admiration. Otherwise, the game is not worth the candle. In that way, resentment finds an outlet, even in an enthusiastic age. And as long as an age, even though less enthusiastic, has the strength to give resentment its proper character, and has made up its mind what its expression signifies, resentment has its own, though dangerous, importance. In Greece, for example, the form resentment took was ostracism, a self-defensive effort, as it were, on the part of the masses, to preserve their equilibrium in face of the outstanding qualities of the eminent. The outstanding man was exiled, but every one understood how dialectical the relationship was, ostracism being a mark of distinction. Thus, in representing a somewhat earlier period in the spirit of Aristophanes, it would be more ironical to let a completely unimportant person be ostracized than to let him become dictator, because ostracism is the negative mark of greatness. But it would be still better to let the story end with the people recalling the man whom they had ostracized because they could no longer do without him, and he would then be a complete mystery to the country of his exile, which would, of course, then be a complete mystery to the country of his exile. Sorry. Let me read that again. I'm a little... But it would be still better to let the story end with the people recalling the man whom they had ostracized because they could no longer do without him, and he would then be a complete mystery to the country of his exile, which would of course be quite unable to discover anything remarkable about him. This is again about Socrates. In the Nights, Aristophanes gives us a picture of the final state of corruption, in which the vulgar rabble ends when, just as in Tibet, where they worship the Dalai Lama's excrement, they contemplate their own scum in its representatives, and that in a democracy is a degree of corruption comparable to auctioning the crown in a monarchy. But as long as resentment still has any character, ostracism is a negative mark of distinction. The man who told Aristides that he had voted for his exile because he could not endure hearing Aristides called the only just man did not deny Aristides' eminence, but admitted something about himself. He admitted that his relation to distinction was the unhappy love of envy instead of the happy love of admiration, but he did not try to belittle that distinction. On the other side, the more reflection gets the upper hand and thus makes people indolent, the more dangerous resentment becomes, because it no longer has sufficient character to make it conscious of its significance. Bereft of that character, reflection is cowardly and vacillating, and according to circumstances, interprets the same thing in a variety of ways. It tries to treat it as a joke, and if that falls, to regard it as an insult, and when that falls, to dismiss it as nothing at all, or else it will treat the thing as a witticism, and if that falls, then say that it was meant as a moral satire, deserving attention, and if that does not succeed, add that it is not worth bothering about. Thus, resentment becomes the constituent principle of want, of character, which from utter wretchedness tries to sneak itself a position all the time, safeguarding itself by conceding that it is less than nothing. The resentment, which results from want of character, can never understand that eminent distinction really is distinction. Neither does it understand itself by recognizing distinction negatively, as in the case of ostracism, but wants to drag it down, wants to belittle it so that it really ceases to be distinguished. And resentment not only defends itself against all existing forms of distinction, but against that which is still to come. The resentment which is establishing itself is the process of leveling. And while a passionate age storms ahead, setting up new things and tearing down old, raising and demolishing as it goes, a reflective and passionless age does exactly the contrary. It hinders and stifles all action. It levels. Leveling is a silent, mathematical, and abstract occupation which shuns upheavals. In a burst of momentary enthusiasm, people might, in their despondency, even long for a misfortune in order to feel the powers of life. But the apathy which follows is no more helped by a disturbance than an engineer leveling a piece of land. At its most violent, a rebellion is like a volcanic eruption and drowns every other sound. At its maximum, the leveling process is a deathly silence in which one can hear one's heartbeat, a science which is a deathly silence. Sorry, I'm not good at reading again. I tend to do this thing where I read and I repeat the last line. My apologies. I'm not a good reader. I'm trying, I'm improving. Let me restart this. At its maximum, the leveling process is a deathly silence in which one can hear one's heartbeat. A science which nothing can pierce, in which everything is engulfed, powerless to resist. One man can be at the head of a rebellion, but no one can be at the head of the leveling process alone. For in that case, he would be the leader, and would thus escape being leveled. Each individual within his own little circle can cooperate in the leveling, but it is an abstract power, and the leveling process is the victory of abstraction over the individual. The leveling process, in modern times, corresponds in reflection to fate in antiquity. The dialectic of antiquity tended towards leadership, the great individual and the masses, the free man and the slaves. So far, the dialectic of Christendom tends towards representation. The majority sees itself in its representative, and it is set free by the consciousness that it is the majority which it represented, in a sort of self-consciousness. The dialectic of the present age tends towards equality, and its most logical, though mistaken, fulfillment is leveling, as the negative unity of the negative reciprocity of all individuals. As the negative unity of the negative reciprocity of all individuals. Sorry, I wasn't paying much attention. I'm gonna paint the walls. That's good. You can. I hope this helps you. I hope my reading helps you paint the walls. If you guys are confused, feel free to leave questions down by anything, but this is probably more than anything just like a bedtime story, because it's probably the first time you've read this text. So the first time I have, at least. And so if that's the case, I just want to again reassure that it's fine. Like if you fall asleep to this, if you just kind of, playing a game alongside this, that's cool. That's good. I think that's absolutely fine, because you shouldn't have to feel pressured to voraciously absorb it. You know what I mean? It's kind of sort of a passive thing. Again, at least to me. It's too late. You lost me since I don't know when. Well, that's fine. You can. It's okay to be lost. I think maybe that's the distinction between me and the text I'm reading is Kierkegaard's sort of trying to usher in a passionate, lamenting this sort of loss of the age, whereas I'm sort of trying to bring it comfortably, not through like a sort of loud violence. Enjoying the ASMR experience, God. I'm just giving it to you guys for free. Like I said, like I remember like 2 weeks ago when I said, yeah, maybe 1,000 subscribers. I'm just doing it for free now. Oh God, I'm not even selling out. There's nothing to sell out for. I have no subscribers. This doesn't benefit me at all. I'm just doing it. If I was focusing, I'd be mildly confused. But since I'm not, don't even know what I don't understand. That's good. Not knowing what you don't understand, knowing that you don't know what you don't understand, is the first step to knowing what you understand. And that is perfectly fine, if not like a great initiation, you know? It's a great side story while I'm making quick. Thank you, Artyom. Thank you. Anyways, let's go back to it. Where were we? Okay. It must be obvious to everyone that the profound significance of the leveling process lies in the fact that it means the predominance of the category generation over the category individuality. In antiquity, the total number of the individuals was there to express, as it were, the value of the outstanding individual. Nowadays, the standard of value has been changed so that equally, approximately so and so many men go to one individual, and one need only be sure of having the right number in order to have importance. Read that again. It must be obvious to everyone that the profound significance of the leveling process, the significance of it, lies in the fact that it means the predominance of the category generation over the category individual. In antiquity, the total number of the individuals was there to express, as it were, the value of the outstanding individual. Nowadays, the standard of value has been changed so that equally, approximately so and so, many men go to one individual, and one need only be sure of having the right number in order to have importance. In antiquity, the individual in the masses had no importance whatsoever. The outstanding individual signified them all. The present age tends towards a mathematical equality, in which equally in all classes, approximately so and so many people go to one individual. Formerly, the outstanding individual could allow himself everything, and the individual in the masses nothing at all. Now, everyone knows that so and so many make an individual, and quite consistently, people add themselves together. It is called joining together, but that is only a polite euphemism. For the most trivial purposes, simply in order to put a passing whim into practice. A few people add themselves together, and the thing is done, then they dare do it. For that reason, not even a preeminently gifted man can free himself from reflection, because he very soon becomes conscious of himself as a fractional part in some quite trivial matter, and so fails to achieve the infinite freedom of religion. The fact that several people united together have the courage to meet death does not nowadays mean that each individually has the courage for even more than death. The individuals fear the judgment and protest a reflection upon his wishing to risk something on his own. The individual no longer belongs to God, to himself, to his beloved, to his art, or to his science. He is conscious of belonging in all things to an abstraction to which he is subjected by reflection, just as a self belongs to an estate. That is why people band together in cases where it is an absolute contradiction to be more than one. The apotheosis, the positive principle of association, is nowadays the devouring and demoralizing principle, which, in the slavery of reflection, makes even virtues into vitia splendida. There is no other reason for this than that eternal responsibility, and the religious singling out of the individual before God is ignored. When corruption sets in at that point, people seek consolation in company, and so reflection catches the individual for life. And those who do not realize even the beginning of this crisis are engulfed without further ado in the reflective relationship. The leveling process is not the action of an individual, but the work of reflection in the hands of an abstract power. It is therefore possible to calculate the law governing it in the same way that one calculates the diagonal in a parallelogram of forces. The individual who levels down is himself engulfed in the process and so on, while he seems to know selfishly what he is doing. One can only say of people en masse that they know not what they do. For just as collective enthusiasm produces a surplus which does not come from the individual, there is also a surplus in this case. A demon is called up, over whom no individual has any power, and though the very abstraction of leveling gives the individual a momentary, selfish kind of enjoyment, he is at the same time signing the warrant for his own doom. Enthusiasm may end in disaster, but leveling is eo ipso the destruction of the individual. No age, and therefore riot, the present age, can bring the skepticism of that process to a halt. For as soon as it tries to stop it, the law of the leveling process is again called into action. It can therefore only be held up by the individual attaining the religious courage which springs from his individual religious isolation. I was once the witness of a street fight. fight, in which 3 men most shamefully set upon a 4th. The crowd stood and watched them with indignation. Expressions of disgust began to enliven the scene. Then several of the onlookers set on one of the 3 assailants and knocked him down and beat him. The avengers had in fact applied precisely the same rules as the offenders. If I may be allowed to do so, I will introduce my own unimportant self into the story and continue. I went up to one of the avengers and tried, by argument, to explain to him how illogical his behavior was. But it seemed quite impossible for him to discuss the question. He could only repeat that such a rascal richly deserved to have 3 people against him. The humor of the situation would have been even more apparent to someone who had not seen the beginning of the brawl, and so simply heard one man saying of another who was alone that he was 3 against 1, and heard the remark just when the very reverse was the case, when they were 3 to 1 against him. In the very first place, it was humorous because of the contradiction which it involved, as when the policeman told his men standing in the street to kindly disperse. Secondly, it had all the humor of self-contradiction. But what I learned from it was that I had better given up all hope of putting a stop to that skepticism, lest it should turn upon me. Interesting. Philosophy to VTubing shall be made not by the prowess of the individual librarian, but by the banded will of the people. Well, that's the present age, and Kierkegaard's cooking that. What Kierkegaard's cooking is that we should bring that back. We shouldn't level it. He's trying to say that I am better than all of you, which is totally true. So that's that's totally what he's saying right here. Calculate how to make him trendy. Well, I don't know. YouTube Shorts, probably. Baiting controversy, starting drama with people. But I'm not very interested in most of those things, so it is what it is. It's interesting this fight that he talks about. The 3 men ganging up on someone, and then once they were leaving the scene, one of the 3 assailants there was 3 people beating up one guy, and then the crowd came in and started beating up one of the 3. They were the original bullies. So it was a double gank. Maybe in terms of in Apex terms, you can think like it was a 3v1. Then 2 parties fighting, and then the third party, the crowd, they were third partying them. In Apex terms, that's how you would explain it. I hope that makes me a relatable VTuber, even though I don't play Apex Legends. But I suppose in Apex terms it would be that. I don't know how else I would be able to explain it in gamer lingo, but here it is. Okay. No single individual, no outstanding individual, in the sense of leadership and conceived according to the dialectical category of fate, will be able to arrest the abstract process, of leveling. For it is negatively something higher, and the age of chivalry is gone. No society or association can arrest that abstract power, simply because an association in itself is in the service of the leveling process. Not even the individuality of the different nationalities can arrest it, for on a higher plane, the abstract process of leveling is a negative representation of humanity pure and unalloyed. The abstract leveling process, that self-combustion of the human race, produced by the friction which arises when the individual ceases to exist as singled out by religion, is bound to continue like a trade wind and consume everything. But though each individual for himself may receive once more a religious education, and in the highest sense will be helped by the examen rigorosum of the leveling process to an essentially religious attitude. For the younger men who, however strongly they personally may cling to what they admire as eminent, realized from the beginning that the leveling process is evil in both the selfish individual and in the selfish generation, but that it can also, if they desire it honestly and before God, became the standing point for the highest life. For them, it will indeed be an education to live in the age of leveling. Oh. Their age will, in the very highest sense, develop them religiously and at the same time educate them aesthetically and intellectually, because in this way the comic will receive its absolute expression. The highest form of the comic arises precisely when the individual comes directly into the infinite abstraction of pure humanity, without any of those intermediary qualifications which temper the humor of man's position and strengthens its pathos, without any of the concrete particulars of organization which the leveling process destroys. But that again is only another expression of the fact that man's only salvation lies in the reality of religion for each individual. Excuse me, I hope you didn't hear that. And it will add fuel to their enthusiasm to understand that it is in fact through error that the individual is given access to the highest, if he courageously desires it. But the leveling process will have to continue and must be completed, just as the scandal had to come into the world, though woe to them by whom it comes. Librarian, I don't know what the hell you just said. What did I say? I think I said something along the lines of, Kierkegaard is kind of championing a sort of individualism, driven by passion. He's advocating against an idea of leveling, an idea of just destroying this destruction of everything to set us all as equals. And I interpreted that jokingly as him saying that I'm better than all of you because I am the only philosopher VTuber that exists. That's what I said, I think, back then. Further really telling everyone to seek God, huh? Also, librarian, you can start drama with long gone philosophers. That's the third philosophy discourse. Yeah, but like that's true. He is really telling everyone to seek God. That's his whole thing. He's very Christian in that regard. Søren Kierkegaard. I won't say that is my favorite part of him, but it is definitely a part of him. And it would do me no good to like try to object to at least before I fully understand it. And believe me, I don't fully understand him yet. I don't claim to it. You can start drama with the long gone philosophers. That's a third of discourse. It's true, but that doesn't really get you clicks on Twitter. That doesn't really get you engagement on Twitter. I think drama has to start with people who are really self-important on Twitter, who think the world revolves around them, and so I have to piss them off, and so they'll like come after me and give me attention, even if it's negative attention. It's still attention nonetheless, and thus anything bad that can come out of that negative attention is offset by the influx of attention that I would actually end up having. That's the philosophy behind gaming the system and engagement baiting, which is why a lot of stuff on Twitter or in social media is just so very angering and frustrating and deliberately ridiculous, but lacks any substance, which I find personally very annoying. Self-important, egocentric worldview. So yeah, philosopher. True, true. In some ways, I'm the anti-philosopher, and in some ways, I precisely am a philosopher because I am also self-important and egocentric, so it all works out, I think. Anyways, Twitter drama aside, I should stop talking about that. It's such a waste of time. Alright, let's get back to this. Okay. Where was I? Did I skip a page? No, I didn't. And it will add fuel to their enthusiasm to understand that it is in fact through error that the individual is given access to the highest. He courageously desires it. But the leveling process will have to continue and must be completed, just as a scandal had to come to the world, the woe to them by whom it comes. That's what I read. It has often been excuse me. It has often been said that a reformation should begin with each man reforming himself. That, however, is not what actually happened, for the Reformation produced a hero who paid God dearly enough for his position as hero. By joining up with him, directly people buy cheap, indeed at bargain prices, what he had paid for so dearly. But they do not buy the highest of all things. The abstract principle of leveling, on the contrary, like the biting east wind, has no personal relation to any individual, but is only an abstract relationship which is the same for everyone. There, no hero suffers for others or helps them. The taskmaster of all alike is the leveling process, which itself takes on their education. And the man who learns most from the leveling and himself becomes the greatest, does not become an outstanding man or a hero. That would only impede the leveling process, which is rigidity consistent to the end. He himself prevents that from happening because he has understood the meaning of the leveling. He becomes a man and nothing else, in the complete equalitarian sense. That is the idea of religion. But under those conditions, the equalitarian order is severe and the profit is seemingly very small. Seemingly. For unless the individual learns in the reality of religion and before God to be content with himself and learns instead of dominating others, to dominate himself, content as priest to be his own audience, and as author his own reader, if he will not learn to be satisfied with that as the highest, because it is the expression of the equality of all men before God and of our likeness to others, that he will not escape from reflection. Maybe that, for one deceptive moment, it will seem to him in relation to his gifts as though he were leveling, but in the end he will sink down beneath the leveling process. There is no good calling upon a Holger Danske or Martin Luther. Their day is over, and at the bottom it is only the individual's laziness which makes a man long to have them back. A worldly impatience, which prefers to buy something cheap, second-hand, rather than to buy the highest of all things, very dear and first-hand. It is worse than useless to found society after society, because negatively speaking, there is something above them, even though the short-sighted member of the society cannot see it. Oh, okay. So what I'm getting from here is that while he is speaking negatively about this sort of leveling that takes place and, telling everyone to seek God as a response, he's also criticizing his religion in his age for doing precisely that, which I think is very fascinating, that you can kind of hold these two senses, these two seemingly opposing stances. That's interesting. I like that. It's sort of warming up to me, the idea a little bit of the sort of, maybe not great man theory, but the sort of the excelling of the individual, the hero, the idea of the hero, being squashed by the crowd, the society, the whatever word you want to use that he's using for leveling, which I think is an interesting word. At least an interesting translation. Again, he didn't write in English. He wrote in Danish, I believe, and this is translated. Danish? I think he was Danish. If I get this wrong, it'd be so embarrassing, but I think he was Danish. He was European. All right? Anyways. The principle of individuality in its immediate and beautiful formation is symbolized for the generation in the outstanding and eminent individual. The group's subordinate individualities round the representative. This principle of individuality, in its eternal truth, uses the abstraction and equality of the generation to level down, and in that way cooperates in developing the individual religiously into a real man. For the leveling process is as powerful where temporary things are considered as it is impotent where eternal things are considered. Reflection is a snare in which one is caught, but once the leap of enthusiasm has been taken, the relation is a different one, and it becomes a noose which drags one into eternity. Reflection is and remains the hardest creditor in existence. Hitherto, it has cunningly bought up all the possible views of life, but it cannot buy the essentially religious and eternal view of life. On the other hand, it can tempt people astray with its dazzling brilliance, and dishearten them by reminding them of all the past. But by leaping into the depths, one learns to help oneself, learns to love others as much as oneself, even though one is accused of arrogance and pride, because one will not accept help, or of selfishness, because one will not cunningly deceive people by helping them to escape their highest destiny. Should anyone complain that what I have set forth here is known to all, and could be said by anyone, then my answer is, the more the merrier. I am not asking for a position of eminence, and I have nothing against everyone knowing my opinion, unless that were to mean, in a sense, that it is to be taken from me and thereby put at the disposal of a negative association. So long as I have permission to retain them, my opinions do not lose their value by being known to everyone. That's kind of peak. That's kind of peak. I don't know about you. That's kind of peak. That's the way I see it. Should anyone complain that what I'm saying is just common sense or a generally agreed upon consensus, then yeah, the more the merrier. A position of eminence is not what I'm asking for, and I have nothing against everyone knowing it. That's true, absolutely. He's so right. Oh, he's so right for this. What a goat. What a goat. Engage in the Genshin community. Drama confirms. Super delayed in the stream, just realized. No problem. Farming drama through the Genshin community. I've thought about that. I wanted to do something about the discourse of Yuri baiting, which I thought was interesting. But I don't know what to do with it yet. I think I have an idea of what I want to do with it, but right now we're kind of consumed by the colorism debates, which aren't really debates. I feel like it's very like, I don't think there's much controversy. I think anyone who doesn't think that Hoyoverse is dishonestly representing culture lives in a bubble that they need to step out of. It's as simple as that. Like, I don't think there's no debate. Like, I don't think there's any back and forth. I think it's straight up just bigotry. If you look at like characters that are supposed to, my god, I'm not gonna talk about Genshin Impact in my fucking philosophy stream. No, you just, oh my god, I almost fell into that. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's peak. I shall believe, Chairman, that's peak. Good. Thank you for just tailoring your opinion to mine. That's what you come to my streams for, is to learn your opinion. Okay. Throughout many changes, the tendency in modern times has remained a leveling one. These changes themselves have not, however, all of them been leveling, for they have none of them abstract enough, each having a certain concrete reality. To some extent, it is true that the leveling process goes on when one great man, oh, here's the great man, attacks another, so that both are weakened, or when one is neutralized by the other, or when an association of people in themselves weak grows stronger than the eminent. Leveling can also be accomplished by one particular caste, the clergy, the bourgeoisie, peasants by the people themselves. But all that is in only the first movement of an abstract power within the concreteness of individuality. In order that everything should be reduced to the same level, it is first of all necessary to procure a phantom, its spirit, a monstrous abstraction, an all-embracing something which is nothing, a mirage, and that phantom is the public. It is only in an age which is without passion, yet reflective, that such a phantom can develop itself with the help of the press, which itself becomes an abstraction. In times of passion and tumult and enthusiasm, even when a people desire to realize a fruitless idea and lay waste and destroy everything, even then there is no such thing as a public. Okay? There are parties, and they are concrete. The press, in times such as those, takes on a concrete character according to the division of parties. But just as sedentary professional people are the first to take up any fantastic illusion which comes their way, so a passionless, sedentary, reflective age, in which only the press exhibits a vague sort of life, fosters this phantom. The public is, in fact, the real leveling master, rather than the actual leveler. For whenever leveling is only approximately accomplished, it is done by something, but the public is a monstrous nothing. The public is a concept which could not have occurred in antiquity because the people, en masse, in corpore, took part in any situation which arose and were responsible for the actions of the individual, and moreover, the individual was personally present and either submitted once to applause or disapproval for his decision. This is Kierkegaard waving away all these haters, because he had some haters back in his day, I remember. Only when the sense of association in society is no longer strong enough to give life to concrete realities is the press able to create that abstraction. The public, consisting of unreal individuals who never are and never can be united in an actual situation or organization, and yet are held together as a whole. The public is a host, more numerous than all the peoples together, but it is a body which can never be reviewed. It cannot even be represented, because it is an abstraction. Nevertheless, when the age is reflective and passionless and destroys everything concrete, the public becomes everything and is supposed to include everything. And that again shows how the individual is thrown back upon himself. Okay. We're talking about D&D leveling now. No, I don't think we are. D&D leveling would be cooler, be a lot simpler. But okay, so that is actually, I see the genuine question behind that, because it can be a little confusing. The leveling that Kierkegaard is talking about right here is one that is like leveling something to an equal plane. So you can imagine perhaps a demolition or a deconstruction site, a construction site demolishing a building. So the building would be leveled, right? It is leveled to the ground, so to speak, rather than the sort of leveling up that might be present in game terms, you know? So that is the leveling that he speaks of here. Not like leveling up, not like going up. That might even be the opposite, actually, hence why it's so confusing. But he's speaking to this equalization, sort of. Yeah. The real moment in time and the real situation being simultaneous with real people, each of whom is something. That is what helps to sustain the individual. But the existence of a public produces neither a situation nor simultaneity. The individual reader of the press is not the public. And even though little by little, a number of individuals, or even all of them, should read it, the simultaneity is lacking. Years might be spent gathering the public together, and still it would not be there. This abstraction, which the individuals so illogically form, quite rightly repulses the individual instead of coming to his help. The man who has no opinion of an event at the actual moment accepts the opinion of the majority, or if he is quarrelsome, of the minority. But it must be remembered that both majority and minority are real people, and that is why the individual is assisted by adhering to them. A public, on the contrary, is an abstraction. To adopt the opinion of this or that man means that one knows that they will be subjected to the same dangers as oneself, that they will be led astray with one if the opinion leads astray. But to adopt the same opinion as the public is a deceptive consolation because the public is only there in abstracto, whilst therefore no majority has ever been so certain of being of being right and victorious as the public. That is not so much consolation to the individual, for a public is a phantom which forbids all personal contact. And if a man adopts public opinion today and is hissed tomorrow, he is hissed by the public. A generation, a people, an assembly of the people, a meeting or a man are responsible for what they are and can be made ashamed if they are inconstant and unfaithful. But a public remains a public. A people, an assembly, or a man can change to such an extent that one may say they are no longer the same. A public, on the other hand, can become the very opposite and still be the same. A public. But it is precisely by means of this abstraction and this abstract discipline that the individual be formed, insofar as the individual is not already informed by his inner life, if he does not succumb, in the process, taught to be content, in the highest religious sense, with himself and his relation to God, to be at one with himself, instead of being in agreement with a public which destroys everything that is relative, concrete and particular in life, educated to find peace within himself and with God, and instead of counting hands. And the ultimate difference between the modern the modern world and antiquity is that the whole is not concrete, and is therefore unable to support the individual, or to educate him as the concrete should, though without developing him absolutely, but is an abstraction which by its abstract equality repels him, and thus helps him to be educated absolutely unless he succumbs in this process. The tedium vitae, so constant in antiquity, was due to the fact that the outstanding individual was what others could not be. The inspiration of modern times will be that any man who finds himself, religiously speaking, has only achieved what everyone can achieve. Hi, I'm from Brazil. I'm looking for VTubers. You have a new phone. Hello. Everyone say hello to. You don't have to. Everyone's probably asleep. Sorry, Levi Yuki. That no one else can say hello. But welcome to the stream. I have a new follower. That's great. If you're looking for VTubers, I am certainly one of them. Here you will find various streams to either fall asleep to or lose your mind to. There's no in between. But thank you for joining me. Thank you. As we read Søren Kierkegaard's The Present Age. I promise not every stream is a reading stream as well, but there will be more of these soon, probably. Anyways. A public is neither a nation, nor a generation, nor a community, nor a society, nor these particular men, for all these are only what they are through the concrete. No single person who belongs to the public makes a real commitment. For some hours of the day, perhaps he belongs to the public. At moments when he is nothing else, since when he really is what he is, he does not form part of the public. Made up of such individuals, at the moments when they are nothing, a public is a kind of gigantic something, an abstract and deserted void, which is everything and nothing. But on this basis, anyone can arrogate himself to a public. And just as the Roman Church chimerically extended its frontiers by appointing bishops in partibu infidelium, so a public is something which everyone can claim. And even a drunken sailor, exhibiting a peep show, has dialectically absolutely the same right to a public as the greatest man. He has just as logical a right to put all those many noughts in front of a single number. A public is everything and nothing, the most dangerous of all powers and the most insignificant. One can speak to a whole nation in the name of the public, and still the public would be less than a single real man, however unimportant. The qualification public is produced by the deceptive juggling of an age of reflection, which makes it appear flattering to the individual, who in this way can arrogate to himself this monster, in comparison with which concrete realities seem poor. The public is the fairy story of an age of understanding, which in imagination makes the individual into something even greater than a king above his people. But the public is also a gruesome abstraction, through which the individual will receive his religious formation or sink. And there's a footnote here as well. As an author, I have fortunately never sought for or had a public, but have contented myself with the individual. And on account of that limitation have almost become a proverb. All Kierkegaard's religious discourses, footnote to the footnote, all Kierkegaard's religious discourses, which form a large part of his works, were dedicated to that individual, with whom joy and thankfulness I call my reader, because he reads, not thinking of the author, but of God. Okay, well, maybe not of God here, but largely, that's kind of the same. Relatable. I stream not for a public, not for a crowd, but I stream for you, your subjective self, whatever that means. I don't know what that means exactly, but yeah. Wait a minute, this is sociology again, isn't it? Well, there's definitely overlap, for sure. There definitely is overlap. I think it's interesting that people don't talk about those overlaps as much nowadays, because back then there was a lot. If I had to venture a guess right now, just off the cuff, I would say it's because of the commodification of education and academia isolating and separating fields into specific things and packages, and so the interdisciplinary interconnectedness of them is slowly being diminished. And one of the things that suffers from that is philosophy, because philosophy, has its fingers in everything pretty much. So, yeah, well. The press is an abstraction, since a paper is not a concrete part of a nation, and only in an abstract sense an individual, which in conjunction with the passionless and reflective character of the age produces that abstract phantom, a public which in its turn is really the leveling power. Consequently, it has an importance apart from its negative religious importance. The fewer ideas there are at any time, the more indolent and exhausted by bursts of enthusiasm will it be. Nevertheless, if we imagine the press growing weaker and weaker because no events or ideas catch hold of the age, the more easily will the process of leveling become a harmful pleasure, a form of sensual intoxication, which flames up for a moment, simply making the evil worse, and the conditions of salvation more difficult, and the probability of decline more certain. Although the demoralization brought about by autocracy and the decay of revolutionary periods have often been described, the decay of an age without passion is something just as harmful, though on account of its ambiguity, it is less obvious. It may not be without interest to consider this point. More and more individuals, owing to their bloodless indolence, will aspire to be nothing at all, in order to become the public, that abstract whole formed in the most ludicrous way, by all participants becoming a third party, an onlooker. This indolent mass, which understands nothing and does nothing itself, this gallery, is on the lookout for distraction and soon abandons itself to the idea that everything that anyone does is done in order to give it, the public, something to gossip about. That indolent mass sits with its legs crossed, wearing an air of superiority, and anyone who tries to work, whether king, official, school teacher, or the better type of journalist, the poet, or the artist, has to struggle to drag the public along with it, while the public thinks in its own superior way that it is the horse. I'm a little more convinced now of this dynamic he wants to set up, that of the king, that of the official, that of the school teacher, not being equal in the sense that we cannot demolish the meaning of teacher by equalizing the classroom. If everyone in the classroom is truly is not just equal, but not just equal in this contemporary democratic, like progressive sense of equality, but like an equal as in almost near identical value and contribution to a classroom type equal. You know what I mean? nonetheless important, the school teacher is the school teacher for a reason, and they have to, has to struggle to drag, well, he laments that they have to struggle to drag the public along with it. I think there can be something better, but this is what him lamenting. While the public, the people being dragged, think in their own superior way, and it's not them. It's not a group of people. The public is everyone else, right? It's not a group, it's everyone. A group is like a majority, or a society, and that is, he distinguishes that between public. So the public thinks that it is the horse, the driving force of it, when in reality it's not, or at least the struggle is that they are not. Interesting. Okay. Streams for Parrot, a lovely, such besties. Sorry, late for the lecture, Professor. My dog burnt my toilet. It's not a lecture, just a little friendly reading, but thank you for joining us. I hope your toilet is fine. That doesn't sound all right. Delete a message anyways, waiting for him to say wake up sheeple. I think that's kind of the gist of his work, is he's trying to say wake up sheeple a lot. But it's interesting that he's a Christian, because a lot of contemporary work and contemporary understandings of religion and Christianity is that they are the sheepest of sheeple. For example, even Nietzsche criticizes those of faith to be like that, and Kierkegaard doesn't necessarily disagree, because he does in some sense comment on how his age of religion was like that. So interesting. Okay. If I tried to imagine the public as a particular person, for although some better individuals momentarily belong to the public, they nevertheless have something concrete about them, which holds them in its grip, even if they have not attained the supreme religious attitude. The supreme religious attitude, I love that. I should perhaps think of one of the Roman emperors, a large, well-fed figure, suffering from boredom, looking only for the sensual intoxication of laughter, since the divine gift of wit is not earthly enough, and so for a change he wanders about, indolent rather than bad, but with a negative desire to dominate. Everyone who has read the classical authors knows how many things a Caesar could try out in order to kill time. In the same way, the public keeps a dog to amuse it. That dog is the sum of the literary world. Footnote here, The Corsair, the paper in which Kierkegaard was lampooned. Okay, so he's kind of like, he's addressing his haters, he's firing back at the diss track put on him. Okay, I see. If there is someone superior to the rest, perhaps even a great man, the dog is set on him and the fun begins. The dog goes for him, snapping and tearing at his coattails, allowing itself every possible ill-mannered familiarity until the public tires and says it may stop. That is an example of how the public levels. Their betters and superiors in strength are mishandled, and the dog remains a dog, which even the public despises. The leveling is therefore done by a third party. A non-existent public leveling with the help of a third party, which in its insignificance is less than nothing, being already more than leveled, and so the public is unrepentant, for it was after all not the public that acted but the dog. Just as one says to children, the cat's mother did it. Okay, The public is unrepentant. It was not really belittling anyone. It just wanted a little amusement. For had the leveling implement been remarkably energetic, the indolent public would have been fooled, because the implement itself would have been in the way. But when their betters are held down by the insignificant and the insignificant by itself, then no one is quit of anything. Okay. He doesn't seem to like dogs very much. That may be very unpopular. Maybe that's the drama to start. Lampooning people's dogs. Maybe. People are lampooning pet owners. Maybe that's the, Maybe Kierkegaard also had a dog burn his toilet, and that's why he said that. Maybe. Anyways. The public is unrepentant. For it is not they who own the dog. They only subscribe. They neither set the dog on any one nor whistle it off directly. If asked, they would answer, "The dog is not mine, it has no master." And if the dog had to be killed, they would say, "It was a really good thing that bad-tempered dog was put down. Everyone wanted it killed, even the subscribers." That is weird. That is speaking probably... That is when... That shows a little bit that he's out of touch. Or at least that he's definitely... how shall I say? He's speaking of a time that is a little different from our time. I don't think in our time that's quite the case. But nonetheless, it's part of his point, and it's not the most salient one here, but yeah. Perhaps someone, familiarizing himself with such a case, and inclined to fix his attention upon the outstanding individual who suffered at the hands of the public, may be of the opinion that such an ordeal is a great misfortune. I cannot at all agree with such an opinion, for anyone who really wishes to be helped to attain the highest is in fact benefited by undergoing such a misfortune, and must rather desire it even though people may be led to rebel. The really terrible thing is the thought of all the lives that are or easily may be wasted. I will not even mention those who are lost, or at any rate led completely astray, those who play the part of the dog for money, for the many who are helpless, thoughtless, and sensual, who live superior lazy lives, and never receive any deeper impression of existence than this meaningless grin, and all those people who are led into further temptation, because in their stupidity they even become self-important by commiserating with the one who is attacked, without even understanding that in such a position the person attacked is always the stronger, without understanding that in this case the terrible and ironical truth applies. Weep not over him, but over yourselves. That's weird. So the dog is not like an actual dog, but like which I misread, unfortunately. I'm sorry. My reading comprehension isn't very good either. But those who play the part of the dog for money. Okay. But the many who are... I never receive any deeper impression of existence than this meaningless grin. And all those bad people are led into further temptation because in their stupidity they even become self-important by commiserating with their one. Okay. Weep over him, but weep not over him, but over yourselves. I suspect he's cooking something, but I'm not sure what he's cooking yet. But we'll see. We'll see. Let's move on. That is the leveling process at its lowest. For it always equates itself to the divisor, by means of which everyone is reduced to a common denominator. Eternal life is also a sort of leveling, and yet that is not so, because the common denominator is that everyone should really and essentially be a man in a religious sense. Okay. Hitherto I have been dealing with the dialectical categories and qualifications, and with their consequences, whether actually present at any given moment or not. I shall now abandon the dialectical analysis of the present age in order to arrive dialectically at its concrete affirmations regarding everyday life. It is here that the darkest side will be seen. But although this cannot be denied, it is equally certain that just as reflection itself is not evil, so a very reflective age has its lighter side, simply because a higher degree of reflection implies greater significance than immediate passion. For when enthusiasm intervenes to gather the powers of reflection together into a decision, and because reflection confers on the average a greater capacity for action, then, when religion enters in, it takes command of that increased capacity for action. Reflection is not the evil, but a reflective condition, and the deadlock which it involves, by transforming the capacity for action into a means of escape from action. It's not evil, but a reflective condition, which involves the transforming the capacity for action into a means of escape from action. Okay. Is both corrupt and dangerous and leads to a retrograde. Is both corrupt and dangerous and leads in the end to a retrograde movement. I see. I just want to see if my messages show up on the screen. It says purple spot. Nice. Well, they do. That tends to happen with stream chats. See, I don't recognize you, so welcome. You seem to be new here. We read things, and on occasion, it's like it's been a month since my debut, and this is the first time I'm actually reading something as a librarian philosopher. So it is what it is. But yeah, welcome. Your chats will show on the screen because that's what the chat screen is for. That it is implemented properly, thankfully. So welcome. Hello. Okay. The present age is essentially one of understanding, lacking in passion, and has therefore abolished the principle of contradiction. By comparison with a passionate age, an age without passion gains in scope what it loses in intensity. But this scope may once again become the condition of a still higher form, if a corresponding intensity assumes control of the extended field of activity which is put at its disposal. The abolition of the principle of contradiction, expressed in terms of existence, means to live in contradiction with oneself. The creative omnipotence of the differentiating power of passion, which makes the individual completely at one with himself, is transformed into the extended scope of reflective understanding. As a result of knowing and being everything possible, one is in contradiction with oneself, i.e., nothing at all. The principles of contradiction strengthens the individual's faithfulness to himself and makes him as constant as the number 3 spoken of so beautifully by Socrates, when he says that it would rather endure anything than become 4 or even a large round number. And in the same way, the individual would rather suffer and be true to himself than be all manner of things in contradiction with himself. Here he is glazing his goat, Socrates by name finally, 19 pages later. Well, in this abstract, there's more to this text. This is just a snippet from a larger text, right? But he laments this abolishment of the principle of contradiction. As the present age is essentially one of understanding that lacks in passion, which I guess includes passion. It gains in scope what it loses in intensity. I think that's sort of true. Although I think our age right now has evolved a little bit beyond that, so not as simple anymore. But nonetheless, he's sort of cooking here. He's sort of spitting. Okay. What is talkativeness? It is the result of doing away with the vital distinction between talking and keeping silent. Only someone who knows how to remain essentially silent can really talk, and act essentially. Silence is the essence of inwardness, of the inner life. Mere gossip anticipates real talk. And to express what is still in thought weakens action by forestalling it. But someone who can really talk because he knows how to remain silent will not talk about a variety of things, but about one thing only. And he will know when to talk and when to remain silent. Where mere scope is concerned, talkativeness wins the day. It jabbers on incessantly about everything and nothing, when people's attention is no longer turned inwards, when they are no longer satisfied with their own inner religious lives, but turn to others and to things outside themselves, where the relation is intellectual, in search of that satisfaction, when nothing important ever happens to gather the threads of life together with the finality of a catastrophe. That is the time for talkativeness. In a passionate age, great events, for they correspond to each other, give people something to talk about. Talkativeness, on the contrary, has, in quite another sense, plenty to talk about. And when the event is over, and silence follows, there is still something to remember and to think about while one remains silent. But talkativeness is afraid of the silence which reveals its emptiness. Oh my god. Holy shit. This guy is cooking. This is the best paragraph. Okay, I don't know if this is the best paragraph, but this is one of my favorites. Kierkegaard just explained in a sentence the entire philosophy of yapping. That's it. This is the philosophy of yapping. This is the essence of Charis Euphranor, the last librarian of Alexandria. The yap machine himself. Wow, incredible. I want to read that. Everyone, please pay attention. I know. Yes, I said everyone fall asleep. It's fine. You feel free to tune out of this. But this, just for this paragraph, maybe tune in a bit. And it's not too hard to understand. I just think it's good. This is just really good. I'll read it one more time. Let's see. What is talkativeness? It is the result of doing away with a vital distinction between talking and keeping silent. Only someone who knows how to remain essentially silent can really talk and act essentially. Silence is the essence of inwardness, of the inner life. Mere gossip anticipates real talk, and to express what is still in thought weakens action by forestalling it. But someone who can really talk, because he knows how to remain silent, will not talk about a variety of things, but about one thing only, and he will know when to talk and when to remain silent. Where mere scope is concerned, talkativeness wins the day. It jabbers on incessantly about everything and nothing, when people's attention is no longer turned inwards, when they are no longer satisfied with their own inner religious lives, but turn to others and to things outside themselves, where the relation is intellectual, in search of that satisfaction when nothing important ever happens to gather the threads of life together with the finality of a catastrophe. That is the time for talkativeness. In a passionate age, great events, for they correspond to each other, give people something to talk about. Talkativeness, on the contrary, has in quite another sense plenty to talk about. And when the event is over, and silence follows, there is still something to remember and to think about while one remains silent. Talkativeness is afraid of the silence which reveals its emptiness. That is beautiful. That is a beautiful silence. That is a beautiful, beautiful silence. You use your voice very softly. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Chat clip that. Maybe clip that. Maybe clip this actually, because this is just so good. This is like I might just, like this is just you know what? This is the response for Twitter. If anyone ever like engages in drama with me on Twitter, I'm just gonna post this paragraph, and that's it. Oh, fantastic. I think he hit the nail right in the head. and this isn't, I don't think this is the first time I've heard a sentiment quite like this, but he expressed it so concisely and in a way that reflects to this larger point that he's talking of, this present age, which, wow, is quite powerful. Fascinating. Okay, all right. The law governing artistic production applies on a smaller scale to everyone in daily life. Every man who has a real experience experiences at the same time all its possibilities in an ideal sense, including the opposite possibility. Aesthetically, these possibilities are his lawful property. Not so, however, his private and personal reality. His talk and his production both rest upon his silence. The ideal perfection of his talk and of his production will correspond to his silence, and the absolute expression of that silence will be that the ideal will include the qualitatively opposite possibility. But as soon as the artist prostitutes his own reality, he is no longer essentially productive. His beginning is his end, and his very first word will be a sin against the modesty of the ideal. This type of artistic production is therefore, even aesthetically speaking, a kind of private gossip. It is easily recognized because it is not balanced by its opposite. For ideally, it is the balance of opposites. It is easily, sorry, let me read that again. It is easily recognized because it is not balanced by its opposite. Ideality, yes, is the word, is the balance of opposites. For example, if the man who is moved to write by suffering is really initiated into the realm of ideals, he will reproduce the happiness as well as suffering of his experience with the same affection. The condition of his attaining his ideal is the silence with which he shuts off his own personality. Otherwise, in spite of all precautions, such as changing the scene to Africa, his one-sided predelication will be privately recognizable. For an author, like anyone else, must have his own private personality, but it must be his own, and this is a Greek word, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the footnote says that it translates to Holy of Holies. Interesting. And just as the entrance to a house is barred by the crossed bayonets of the guards, the approach to a man's personality is barred by the dialectical cross of qualitative opposites in an ideal equilibrium. Was that he's screaming? How crude. Will not elaborate on that further. And I will not confirm nor deny either. Anyways. What is true of the greater relationship, and is very clear in the above circumstances, which is why they were instanced, is also true in a lesser degree of the smaller ones. And once again, silence is the conditio sine qua non of all educated social intercourse. Let me read that again. Sorry, that was a little... What? What is true of the greater relationship and is very clear in the above circumstances, which is why they were instanced, is also true in a lesser degree of the smaller ones. And once again, silence is the conditio sine qua non of all educated social intercourse. The more thoroughly man grasps the ideal and the idea in silence, the more capable will he be of reproducing man's daily life, so that it seems as though he only talked of particular things at a certain distance. The less ideal, the more superficial his talk, and his conversation will become a meaningless repetition of names, of absolutely reliable, private information of what this and that person, mentioning all their names, he had said, etc., etc. And conversations, in general, will take on a talkative confidential note about what one is doing, or going to do, what one would have said on a certain occasion, which particular girl one is making love to, why nevertheless one does not want to marry. The introspection of silence is the condition of all educated social intercourse. The exteriorized caricature of inwardness is vulgarity and talkativeness. Kierkegaard is launching an attack on people who yap and do small talk, and I love it. Oh, I love it. God, I hate small talk, and you know what? Maybe this is why. Maybe I found my reason. It's not at all because I'm bad at it, alright? It's not because I'm bad at small talk and I'm insecure about it. It's because this is backed by a strong philosophy. Alright, let's move on. Wasn't painting the walls because so yeah. I feel like I do a good enough job depicting myself as the Sojak, but it is what it is. One finds excellent examples of the kind of talkativeness I'm referring to in the novel. Footnote here, which Kierkegaard was reviewing The Two Ages. Yes, so he was reviewing the novel The Two Ages, and he gave this this review, and within this review was this particular piece of writing that I'm reading now. So this is in response to something. So one finds excellent examples of the kind of talkativeness I'm referring to in the novel. It consists entirely of trivialities. People's names are always mentioned, and they're people whose trivial way of life is interesting because of their names. People who are talkative certainly chatter away about something, and indeed, their one wish is to have an excuse for more gossip. But the subject is non-existent from the ideal point of view. It always consists of some trivial fact, such as that Mr. Marsden is engaged and has given his fiancée a Persian shawl, that Peterson, the poet, is going to write some new poems, or that Marcuson, the actor, mispronounced a certain word last night. If we could suppose for a moment that there was a law which did not forbid people talking, but simply ordered that everything which was spoken about should be treated as though it had happened 50 years ago, the gossips would be done for. They would be in despair. On the other hand, it would not really interfere with anyone who could really talk. That an actor could have mispronounced the word, could only be interesting if there was something interesting in the mispronunciation itself. In which case, the 50 years make no difference. But Miss Gusta, for example, would be in despair. She who had been in the theater that very evening in a box with Alderman Waller's wife. For was it not she who noticed the slip and even noticed the member of the chorus smiling, etc., etc.? It really would be a shame and cruelty to all those silly, gossiping people who must all the same be allowed to live. And so the law is only posited. With gossip, therefore, the vital distinction between what is private and what is public is obliterated, and everything is reduced to a kind of private public gossip which corresponds more or less to the public of which it forms part. The public is public opinion, which interests itself in the most private concerns. Something that nobody would dare to tell a gathering, that nobody could talk about, and which even the gossips would not like to admit to have gossiped about, can perfectly well be written for the public, and as a member of the public, people may know all about it. Wow. There you go. That is, in a few paragraphs, Søren Kierkegaard summarizing Twitter and popular Twitch streams, popular Twitch streamer clips, and r/livestream fails. That's exactly what this is, and celebrity media, and gossip, and news, essentially. What the news is nowadays. That's what this is. And Søren Kierkegaard, hundreds of years ago, summarized it perfectly. We are so uncomfortable with our own silence. And that if we had to speak as though things happened 50 years ago, it could alleviate a lot of this bullshit, right? Because if something happened that was important now, that will be important in 50 years, then sure, it's something worth talking about. But if it's not, then, you know, in Kierkegaard's words, and, well, translated through mind, and pardon the crassness, I'm trying to translate it for a contemporary audience, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up about celebrity media and gossip. No one cares. Or rather, people care too much. It's not that no one cares. No one should care. People do. People do care, and that's a problem. They shouldn't care. It's meaningless. It's nothing. It's my rant on drama earlier on that I made in an older stream. But really, why? You know, what's the point? Oh, point. I can't do okay, hold on, let me just go back. Now I can do arrow keys again, sorry. Arrow keys were a little bugged. I could read this out again. I could. But maybe not. Maybe I'll just compile it into a clip and then post it on my main channel and then put clickbait on it, like Kierkegaard destroys Twitter, something like that. We'll see what I plan to do with this. It is very interesting nonetheless. All right, so now he's gonna get into something else. Let's see what this is. What is formlessness? It is the result of doing away with the vital distinction between form and content. Formlessness may, therefore, unlike madness or stupidity, have a content that is true, but the truth it contains can never be essentially true. It will be capable of being extended so as to include everything or touch upon everything, whereas real content is clearly, and if one likes, miserably limited because of its intensity and self-absorption. Okay. Formlessness. I see. The universality of formlessness in a passionless but reflective age is expressed, moreover, not only by the fact that the most varied ideas are found dallying in the same company, but by the same diametrically opposite fact that people find a paramount longing for and pleasure in acting on principle. A principle, as the word indicates, is what comes first, i.e., the substance. The idea in the undeveloped form of feeling and of enthusiasm which drives on the individual by its own inner power. That is entirely wanting in a passionless individual. To him, a principle is something purely external, for the sake of which he does one thing as willingly as another, and the opposite of both into the bargain. The life of an individual without passion is not the development of a self-revealing principle. On the contrary, his inner life is something hurrying along, always on the move, and always hurrying to do something on principle. A principle in that sense becomes a monstrous something or other, an abstraction just like the public. And while the public is something or other so monstrous that not all the nations of the world and all the souls in eternity put together are as numerous, every one, even a drunken sailor, can have a public. And not the same is true, and the same is true of a principle. It is something immense, which even the most insignificant man can add to the most insignificant action, and thus become tremendously self-important. When an honest insignificant man suddenly becomes a hero for the sake of a principle, the result is quite as comic as though a fashion decreed that everyone was to wear a cap with a peak 30 feet long. That would be funny. If a man had a little button sewn on the inner pocket of his coat on principle, his otherwise unimportant and quite serviceable action would become charged with importance. It is not improbable that it would result in the formation of a society. Okay. A principle indeed, and formlessness. Okay. It is acting on principle, which does away with the vital distinction which constitutes decency. For decency is immediate, whether the immediateness is original or acquired. Excuse me, I just burped. I hope you didn't hear that. So if you didn't, then pretend I didn't say this either. It has its seat in feeling, and in the impulse and consistency of an inner youth enthusiasm. On principle, one can do anything, and what one does is, fundamentally, a matter of indifference. Just as a man's life remains insignificant, even though on principle he gives his support to all the needs of the times, even when, by virtue of being a mute, and in that capacity, as the organ of public opinion, he is well known as the figures on a barrel organ that can move forward and bow plate in hand. On principle, a man can do anything, take part in anything, and ask himself remain inhuman and indeterminate. On principle, a man may interest himself in the founding of a brothel. There are plenty of social studies on the subject written by the health authorities. And the same man can, on principle, assist in the publication of a new hymn book, because it is supposed to be the great need of the times. But it would be as unjustifiable to conclude from the first fact that he was debauched as it would, perhaps, to conclude from the second that he read or sang hymns. In this way, everything becomes permissible if done on principle. The police can go to certain places on official duty, to which no one else can go. But as a result, one cannot deduce anything from their presence. In the same way, one can do anything on principle and avoid all personal responsibility. People pull to pieces on principle what they admire personally, which is nonsensical, for while it is true that everything creative is latently polemical, since it has to make room for the new which it is bringing into the world, a purely destructive process is nothing, and its principle is emptiness. So what does it need space for? But modesty, repentance, and responsibility cannot easily strike root and ground where everything is done on principle. The police can go to certain places on official duty. Okay, so here's what he's saying, that because our age has accepted this idea, on principle, that in this example here he pulls, which I think is quite helpful, the police can go to certain places on official duty that no one else is allowed to do, because they're the police, right? But as a result, you cannot deduce anything from their presence. So, because their police is the reason behind their presence at a certain place, you cannot get anything out of it beyond the fact that they are policemen and they wear uniforms, whatever, which is just observable immediately. Whereas if it was some individual who wasn't a police, who was in somewhere they shouldn't be, you could deduce certain things, he says, that would otherwise not be obvious. Okay. Destructive, he argues. And I don't think I disagree. I think I agree, which is interesting. Hope you don't hear my keyboard noises. That's me tabbing in and out to read if anything has been written. Alright. What is superficiality and the desire to show off? Superficiality is the result of doing away with the vital distinction between concealment and manifestation. Ooh, okay. It is the manifestation of emptiness, but where mere scope is concerned, it wins, because it has the advantage of dazzling people with its brilliant shams. Real manifestation is homogeneous, because it is really profound. whereas superficiality has a varied and omnium gatherum appearance. Its love of showing off is the self-admiration of conceit and reflection. The concealment and reserve of inwardness is not given time in which to conceive an essential mystery, which can then be made manifest, but is disturbed long before that time comes, and so, as a reward, reflection attracts the gaze of egotism upon its varied shams whenever possible. What is flirtation? What is flirtation? It is the result of doing away with the vital distinction between real love and real debauchery. Neither the real lover nor the real debauchee are guilty of flirting. A flirtation only toys with the possibility and is therefore a form of indulgence which dares to touch evil and fails to realize the good. To act on principle is also a kind of flirtation, because it reduces moral action to an abstraction. But in mere scope, flirtation has all the advantages, for one can flirt with anything, but one can only really love one girl. Well, that's a little less progressive, but interesting nonetheless. From the point of view of love, if properly understood, any addition is really a subtraction. Even though in a confused age, a capricious man may be blinded by pleasure, and the more one adds, the more one takes away. He's talking about people here who engage in anything but strict monogamy, which is interesting. If it helps anyone wrap their head around it, this is somewhat related to Dr. Disrespect drama, if that's more anyone's up anyone's alley. I'm sorry, I'm bad at grounding the readings that I do to what is more palatable and relatable, beyond it being, I'm gonna be honest, trivial bullshit, but alright, whatever. What is reasoning? It is the result of doing away with the vital distinction which separates subjectivity and objectivity. As a form of abstract thought, reasoning is not profoundly dialectical enough. As an opinion and a conviction, it lacks full-blooded individuality. But where mere scope is concerned, reasoning has all the apparent advantage. For a thinker can encompass his science, a man can have an opinion upon a particular subject and a conviction as a result of a certain view of life. But one can reason about anything. In our own day, anonymity has acquired a far more pregnant significance than is perhaps realized. It has an almost epigrammatic significance. People not only write anonymously, they sign their anonymous works. They even talk anonymously. Is that calling me out? My pseudonym? Okay. The very soul of a writer should go into his style. And a man puts his whole personality into the style of his conversation, though limited by the exception which Vettius Claudius noted when he said that if anyone conjured a book, its esprit should appear, unless there was no esprit in it. Nowadays, one can talk with anyone, and it must be admitted that people's opinions are exceedingly sensible, yet the conversation leaves one with the impression of having talked to an anonymity. The same person will say the most contradictory things, and with the utmost calm, make a remark, which coming from him is a bitter satire on his own life. The remark itself may be sensible enough, and of the kind that sounds well at a meeting. It may serve in a discussion preliminary to coming to a decision. In much the same way that paper is made out of rags. But all these opinions put together do not make one human. Personal opinion, such as you may hear from quite a simple man who talks about very little but really does talk, people's remarks are so objective, so all-inclusive, that it is a matter of complete indifference who expresses them. And where human speech is concerned, that is the same as acting on principle, and so our talk becomes like the public, a pure abstraction. There is no longer anyone who knows how to talk, and instead, objective thought produces an atmosphere and abstracts sound, which makes human speech superfluous, just as machinery makes man superfluous. Ooh. In Germany, they even have phrase books for the used drivers. And it will end with lovers sitting together, talking anonymously. In fact, there are handbooks for everything, and very soon education, oh shit, all the world over will consist in learning a greater or lesser number of comments by heart, and people will excel according to their capacity for singling out the various facts, like a printer singling out the letters, but completely ignorant of the meaning of anything. That's real. That's real. He's so real for this. My God. God, he's so real for this. Yeah, people's remarks are so objective, so all-inclusive. Like, people's takes are so lukewarm. Well, nowadays it's a little beyond that. I think we've evolved. I think the difference between Kierkegaard's present age and the age we live in now is we've evolved from this, where I think we started maybe earlier on, 10 years ago, say, that our opinions remarks tend to be super objective and all-inclusive, that it's a complete indifference who expresses them. Everyone's opinion is the same, essentially. And because that is not, or rather, because of the evolution of social media and the way we consume things and the attention that we put to them, we're now driven to the opposite, where it's still just as thoughtless. But instead of thoughtlessly agreeing with everything, we are now thoughtlessly disagreeing with things for the sake of disagreement, being contrarians for the sake of engagement farming and baiting, thing I mentioned earlier. And, well, yeah, that's my contribution to this passage, I suppose, on the present age, that I think the age we live in now, beyond Kierkegaard's age, has moved beyond this in this direction. It's this desire to be remarkable, but not understanding what that means to be remarkable. And it's sort of the post-present age. Interesting. Interesting. Thus, our own age is essentially one of understanding, and on the average, perhaps more knowledgeable than any former generation, but it is without passion. Every man, every one, knows a great deal. We all know which way we ought to go and all the different ways we can go, but nobody's willing to move. If at last someone were to overcome the reflection within him and happen to act, then immediately thousands of reflections would form an outward obstacle. Only a proposal to reconsider a plan is greeted with enthusiasm. Action is met by indolence. Some of the superior and self-satisfied find the enthusiasm of the man who tried to act ridiculous. Others are envious because he made a beginning when, after all, they knew just as well as he did what should not be done, or what should be done, but did not do it. Still, others use the fact that someone has acted in order to produce numerous critical observations and give vent to a store of arguments, demonstrating how much more sensibly the thing could have been done. Others, again, busy themselves guessing the outcome, and if possible, influencing events a little so as to favor their own hypothesis. You know what that is? That's academic philosophy. No one cares about doing anything. Yeah? And you may think, well, that's what philosophy's always been about. It's always been about thinking about things. No. Not just, it's always been about thinking about things, but thinking to what end? To the end of thinking itself would be pointless. At least here. Kierkegaard and I would share the same opinion. Feel free to disagree with me and try to argue for thinking as its own ends, but frankly, I just don't think that's very true. I don't think that's faithful understanding of the world right now. I think if you speak of that, reasoning for the sake of reasoning and nothing else, then you are, for lack of a better word, in my opinion, right, privileged and ignorant of the suffering that exists. That's all I have to say. I will not comment more on it. Anyways, it is said that two English noblemen were once riding along a road when they met a man whose horse had run away with him and who, being in danger of falling off, shouted for help. One of the Englishmen turned to the other and said, 100 guineas he falls off. Taken, said the other. With that, they spurred their horses to a gallop and hurried on ahead to open the toil gates and to prevent anything from getting in the way of the runaway horse. In the same way, though without that heroic and millionaire-like spleen, our own reflective and sensible age is like a curious, critical, and worldly wise person, who at the most has vitality enough to lay a wager. Yeah. That's what I was... You know what? He's cooking, because that was pretty much in line with what I said just now before reading the paragraph. God, he's so based. That's why he's the GOAT, guys. That's why he's the GOAT. Life's existential tasks have lost the interest of reality. Illusion cannot build a sanctuary for the divine growth of inwardness, which ripens to decisions. One man is curious about another. Everyone is undecided, and their way of escape is to say that someone must come who will do something, and then they will bet on him. It is quite impossible for the community or the idea of association to save our age. On the contrary, association is the skepticism, which is necessary in order that the development of individuality may proceed uniformly, so that the individual will either be lost or disciplined by such abstractions or find himself religiously. Nowadays, the principle of association, which at the most is only valid where material interests are concerned, is not positive, but negative. It is an escape, a distraction, and an illusion. Dialectically, the position is this. The principle of association, by strengthening the individual, enervates him. It strengthens numerically, but ethically, that is a weakening. It is only after the individual has acquired an ethical outlook, in face of the whole world, that there can be any suggestion of really joining together. Otherwise, the association of individuals who are in themselves weak is just as disgusting and as harmful as the marriage of children. Formerly, the sovereign and the great each had their own opinion, and the rest were satisfied and decided enough to realize that they dared not or could not have an opinion. Now, everyone can have an opinion, but they have to band together numerically in order to have one. 25 signatures makes the most frightful stupidity into an opinion, and the considered opinion of a first-class mind is only a paradox. But when the context is meaningless, it is useless to take the broad survey. Best that can be done is to consider each part of speech by itself. And if only nonsense comes out of a man's mouth, it is useless to try and make a coherent speech. And it is better to take each word separately, and so with individuals. Again, kind of spitting facts here. I don't know about you, but this is 25 likes makes the most frightful stupidity into a tweet. Hold on, let me read that one more time in like the gusto that I had earlier. But like now, sorry, let me do it again. Now everyone can have an opinion, but they have to band together numerically in order to have one. 25 likes can make the most frightful stupidity into a tweet. And the considered opinion of a thoughtful mind is only a paradox. Hold on, let me do that one more time. Sorry. One more time. Now, hold on. Now, everyone can have an opinion, but they have to band together numerically in order to have one. 25 likes makes the most frightful stupidity into a tweet. And the considered opinion of a thoughtful mind is only a paradox. But when the context is meaningless, it is useless to take a broad survey. The best that can be done is to consider each part of speech by itself. And if only nonsense comes out of a man's mouth, it is useless to try and make a coherent speech. And it is better off to take each word separately, and so with individuals. That's my contribution. Was that I disagree with you? Great, wonderful. That's good. Thank you for disagreeing. The enemy of my enemy is my enemy. Are you reading lore? Is that the entirety of the McDonald's menu, The Next Shakespeare? This is the present age, an extract of a literature review by Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, and we're reading him today. So is it the entirety of the McDonald's menu? No, not quite. Is it The Next Shakespeare? Not quite either. Though he is a poet in his own right, I will say. But welcome, Vortex Cosmic, because this is what we do here. Well, this is now what we do here, after a month of screwing around and not doing anything. After a month of VTubing, I'm now doing a month of philosopher VTubing. And your table not approve this? Oh, good. I hope so. Be frightening if he did, because I don't think it would be genuine. That the entirety of the McDonald's menu. Yeah. Sorry, I read that again, but it is something to make sense of in the context of alleviating oneself from the brain rot that is Twitter discourse and McDonald's menus, though. So I hope that helps in that regard. I hope it's relatable. The passage I just read, well, that's just, again, that's just Twitter. 25 likes makes the most frightful stupidity into an opinion. Oh. Nowadays, it's not 25, it's like 25,000, but it is what it is. Now, again, numbers don't mean it's the numbers. The change which will come about is this. In the older order, which sprang from the relation between the individual and the generation, the officers, generals, heroes, the man of distinction, the leader within his own sphere, were recognizable, and everyone, in proportion to his authority, with his little detachment, fitted picturesquely and organically into the whole, both supporting and supported by the whole. From now on, the great man, the leader, according to his position, will be without authority because he will have divinely understood the diabolical principle of the leveling process. He will be unrecognizable. He will keep his distinction hidden like plainclothes policemen. And his support will only be negative, repelling people, whereas the infinite indifference of abstraction judges every individual and examines him in his isolation. This order is dialectically the very opposite of that of the prophets and the judges. And just as the danger for them lay in their authority not being recognized, so nowadays the unrecognizable is in danger of being recognized, and of being persuaded to accept recognition and importance as an authority, which could only hinder the highest development. But they are unrecognizable and go about their work like secret agents, not because of any private instruction from God, for that is the case of prophets and judges, but are unrecognizable without authority because they have understood the universal inequality before God, and because they realize this and their own responsibility every moment, are thus prevented from being guilty of thoughtlessly realizing in an inconsistent form this consistent perception. This order is dialectically the opposite of the organizing order symbolized in the outstanding personality, which makes the generation into a support for the individual, whereas now, like an abstraction, the generation is negatively supported by the unrecognizable and turns polemically against the individual in order to save every individual religiously. I'm not sure about the religious angle he has with this, but I will say that it's kind of interesting what he's cooking here with the rather than a well-known and distinguished great or a leader or a king or whatever. Now it's almost like a plainclothes officer in a sense, and I think that's manifested here in this post-present age in influencers. You know, the influencers that, while on the one hand are key opinion leaders, they're thought leaders, they are meant to be there for you to take, you want to get your opinion from them, a reviewer of games, of literature, of music, of whatever. Something for you to banner under. At the same time, has to also be, you know, like a plainclothes officer. They have to be relatable. They have to appear the form of which that is quite like you, rather than to be distinguished away from you. And defined, here's the kicker, defined not in positive support, but in negative support. Defined by their hate. Yes, that speaks quite strongly of the influencer. Now, because it's not about this person's good takes or whatever. Insofar as it's about this person's good takes in relation to the bad ones, in relation to the negative support, to the hate, to the haters, you know? That's what that's being characterized by nowadays. I will say in that regard, he's hit the nail on the head. 825 likes, and Librarian is yet to have an opinion on Twitter. Well, yeah, because I have not had 25 likes on anything on Twitter so far. It's unfortunate. Small indie channel. It is what it is. The struggle is real. I hope it's relatable. Anyways. And so, when the generation which itself desired to level and to be emancipated, to destroy authority, and at the same time itself has, through the skepticism of the principal association, started the hopeless forest fire of abstraction, when as a result of leveling with the skepticism, the generation has rid itself of the individual and of everything organic and concrete, and put in its place humanity, the numerical equality of man and man, when the generation has, for a moment, delighted in this unlimited panorama of abstract infinity, unrelieved by even the smallest eminence, undisturbed by even the slightest interest, a sea of desert, then the time has come for work to begin, for every individual must work for himself, each for himself. No longer can the individual, as in former times, turn to the great for help when he grows confused. That is the past. He is either lost in the dizziness of unending abstraction, or saved forever in the reality of religion. Perhaps very many will cry out in despair, but it will not help them. Already it is too late. If it is true that in former times authorities and powers were misused and brought upon themselves in the nemesis of revolution, it was weakness and impotence which, desiring to stand alone, brought this final nemesis upon them. Nor shall any of the unrecognizable presume to help directly, or to speak directly, or to teach directly at the head of the masses, in order to direct their decisions, instead of giving his negative support, and so helping the individual to make the decision which he himself has reached. Any other course would be the end of him, because he would be indulging in the short-sighted compassion of man, instead of obeying the order of divinity, of an angry yet so merciful divinity. For the development is, in spite of everything, a progress, because all the individuals who are saved will receive the specific weight of religion, its essence at first hand, from God himself. Then it will be said, behold, all is in readiness. See how the cruelty of abstraction makes the true form of worldliness only too evident. The abyss of eternity opens up before you. The sharp scythe of the leveler makes it possible for every one individually to leap over the blade. And behold, it is God who waits. Leap, then, into the arms of God. But the unrecognizable neither can nor dares help man, not even in his most faithful disciple, his mother, or the girl for whom he would gladly give his life. They must make the leap themselves, for God's love is not a second-hand gift. And yet the unrecognizable, according to his degree, will have a double work compared to the outstanding of man of the same degree. Because he will not only have to work continuously, but at the same time labor to conceal his work. A trick I like for reading religious writers is replacing God and religion for a higher goal and values. I mean, does that kind of work? I think it does in some sense. I do think it is a little disingenuous though, because for some readings, like for example for Søren Kierkegaard, who's such a Christian, that like to just kind of replace his idea of God with like an idea of higher power ambiguously is a little disingenuous, because you don't have to agree with it to read it and acknowledge it, right? At least for me. So personally, I would like to admonish your way of it, although I do understand where it comes from, and sometimes, although unfortunately, I do catch myself doing the same, replacing, religious writing with other writings. I think it's a little disingenuous for certain writers who are cooking, who know what they're talking about. But there are plenty who don't. In which case, that totally works. If you're reading someone who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, who don't know what they're cooking, replacing these words with higher goal or values in that sense could be sensible. It could make sense. It could make the reading a little easier, but I think he kind of knows a little bit about what he's talking about, even if I may disagree with it in some cases. Okay. But the desolate abstraction of the leveling process will always be continued by its servants, lest it should end with a return of the old order. The servants of the leveling process are the servants of the powers of evil, for leveling itself does not come from divinity, and all good men will at times grieve over its desolation. But divinity allows it and desires to bring the highest into relation with the individual, with each and every man. The servants of the leveling process are known to him, which is unrecognizable, but he dare not use either power or authority against them, for that would be to reverse the development, since it would become immediately apparent to a third person that the unrecognizable was an authority, and in that way the third man would be prevented from attaining to the highest. Sorry, I was like slurring over some of my words in this paragraph. I'm like a little tired and I'm struggling to get it through my head as well. My apologies. I'll do the next paragraphs a little bit. Okay. Only by suffering can the unrecognizable dare to help on the leveling process, and by the same suffering action, judge the instruments. He dare not overcome the leveling process directly. That would be his end, for it would be the same as acting with authority. But he will overcome it in suffering, and in that way express once more the law of his existence, which is not to dominate, to guide, to lead, but to serve in suffering and help indirectly. Those who have not made the leap will look upon his unrecognizable action, his suffering as failure. Those who have made the leap will suspect that it was victory, but they can have no certainty, for they could only be made certain by him, and if he gave that certainty to a single person, it would be the end of him, because he would have been unfaithful to the divinity in desiring to play at being authority. That would mean that he had failed, not only by being unfaithful to God in trying to use authority, but because he did not obey God and teach men to love one another by compelling himself, so that even though they begged him to do so, he should not have deceived them by exerting authority. But I break off. All this is only fooling, for if it is true that every man must work for his own salvation, then all the prophecies about the future of the world are only valuable and allowable as a recreation or as a joke, like playing bowls or cards. As is he just like, JK, actually, I'm trolling. I don't know what I'm talking about. No, that's not what he's saying here. What's he saying here? If it is true that men must work for their salvation, then prophecies about the future or the world are only valuable as recreation. So if we have to do shit, then prophecies about salvation don't matter. And that kind of contradicts with what he thinks. I actually think he's cooking in the former rather than the latter point, but it must always be remembered that reflection is not in itself something harmful. That on the contrary, it is necessary to work through it in order that one's actions should be more intensive. The stages of all actions, which are performed with enthusiasm, are as follows. First of all comes immediate enthusiasm. Then follows the stage of cleverness, which, because immediate enthusiasm does not calculate, assumes with a calculating cleverness the appearance of being the higher. And finally comes the highest and most intensive enthusiasm, which follows the stage of cleverness, and is therefore able to see the shrewdest plan of action but disdain it, and thereby receive the intensity of an eternal enthusiasm. For the time being, however, and for some time to come, this really intensive enthusiasm will remain completely misunderstood. And the question is whether it can ever become popular, i.e., whether one can presume upon such a degree of cleverness in the average man that cleverness will no longer seduce and enchant him, and may presume that he will be able to dominate it by having attained the highest form of enthusiasm, but as it were squander to it. For an enthusiastic action, being always the opposite of shrewd, is never obvious. The enthusiasm of Socrates was not immediate. On the contrary, he was clever enough to see what he had to do in order to escape, although he had disdained to act according to that opinion, just as he refused the preferred speech. That is why there is nothing obvious about his heroic death, and even in death he remained ironical by putting to the shrewd and the clever the question whether he could really have been clever, since he did the reverse. That is the point at which cleverness is left hanging in mid-air, hoisted, with its own reflective judgment and that of the world about it, afraid that an action performed in the teeth of cleverness may be confused with an action performed without cleverness. An immediate enthusiasm does not know such a danger, and therefore requires the impetus of the most intense enthusiasm in order to get through life. Such higher seriousness, and in all highest seriousness, and can be known from its category, that it acts against understanding. Neither does immediate goodness know the danger of reflection, where goodness and weakness are mistaken and confused. And it is precisely for that reason that, after reflection, it requires a religious impetus to set goodness afloat again. Ooh. Here, he is commenting on Socrates and specifically his hemlock death and how people misunderstand it. They don't understand the brilliance behind that death. And part of that brilliance precisely is in putting that doubt in readers' heads to think, well, why did Socrates just let himself get executed? Why didn't he leave? He had a good way to escape. He could have educated more people, yada, yada, yada. They don't understand, according to Kierkegaard, the brilliance of Socrates and his mastery of irony that isn't not just words and thoughts, but through action, through the action that he takes. And you know what? That's kind of cooking as well. I like that. I think that's cooking. We do not understand God in the way that it was understood. In the Confessions, it's described finding God through introspection. To me, I wouldn't find God, but a God equivalent, a God larger than life. That's a good point. I think that's a good point. Sorry that you made that comment earlier, but I didn't read it. But that's a good point. We do not understand God nowadays as people did back then. I think that, yeah, that can be true. But at least for me, what I do is I try to understand God rather than try to understand it through my lens now of introspection. I try to put myself in the older time period and try to understand their confessions of God in that way. So in a sense, rather than trying to bring Kierkegaard to the 21st century. I'm trying to bring myself to the to the 18th century. I don't know when he I'm bad with dates and facts, okay, and knowledge. I have not a lot of it. But you know, his time, during his time. So yeah, I don't think either of our interpretations or readings are wrong. It's just I have a different approach to it, I guess. Okay. And I think this is the last paragraph, the entire thing. Or not the entire thing, but of this bit of it that I'm going to read today. In our times, when so little is done, an extraordinary number of prophecies, apocalypses, glances at, and studies of the future appear, and there is nothing to do but to join in and be one with the rest. Yet I have the advantage over the many who bear a heavy responsibility when they prophesy and give warnings, because I can be perfectly certain that no one would think of believing me. So I do not ask that anyone should make a cross in their calendar, or otherwise bother to see whether my words are filled. If they are fulfilled, then people will have something else to think about than my accidental being. And if they are not fulfilled, well, then I shall simply be a prophet in the modern sense of the word. For a prophet nowadays means to prognosticate and nothing more. In a certain sense, a prophet cannot do anything else. It was providence that fulfilled the words of the older prophets, so perhaps we modern prophets, lacking the addition coming from providence, might say with Thales, what we predict will either happen or not. For to us too has God granted the gift of prophecy. Okay, I sort of butchered the last paragraph. Let me read it one more time. Alright. This is a good paragraph. I want to close off with it. In our times, when so little is done, an extraordinary number of prophecies, apocalypses, glances at, and studies of the future appear, and there is nothing to do but to join in and be one with the rest. Yet, I have the advantage over the many who bear a heavy responsibility when they prophesy and give warnings, because I can perfectly certain that no one would think and give warnings, because I can be perfectly certain that no one would think of believing me. Sorry, I think I misread that. Let me do this one more time. Oh God, I'm so sorry. Yet, I have the advantage over the many who bear a heavy responsibility when they prophesy and give warnings, because I can be perfectly certain that no one would think of believing me. So I do not ask that anyone should make a cross in their calendar, or otherwise bother to see whether my words are fulfilled. If they are fulfilled, then people will have something else to think about than my accidental being. And if they are not fulfilled, well, then I shall simply be a prophet in the modern sense of the word. For a prophet nowadays means to prognosticate and nothing more. In a certain sense, a prophet cannot do anything else. It was providence that fulfilled the words of the older prophets. So perhaps we modern prophets, lacking the addition coming from providence, might say with Thales that what we predict will either happen or not. For to us, too, has God granted the gift of prophecy. And that, I believe, is it. That is The Present Age by Kierkegaard. It's been 3 hours? Oh my god, hold on. Okay, so this is a reading of it. I have some thoughts. Not really many. Librarian likes doing historical reconstruction. Understandable. Anyway, stream almost lasted me the whole roof. Thank you. For saying that it lasted you the whole roof. That is good to hear. Do I reconstruct history? Well, let's just say I, as Charis Euphranor, exist beyond the boundaries of space and time and of history, and so my understanding of history is inevitably a little different from yours. But whatever. All right. Okay, so let me, is there a, I just go back to it. Okay, that's the end of the text. I suppose we can move on to the first page. Go. Ignore the web browser. The sketchy PDF scan that may or may not be legit. Just ignore that, okay? We're struggling here. We're struggling out here, okay? To find a copy to be read without being a PDF file that may or may not dox personal information, all right? We're struggling, okay. Initial thoughts upon my first reading of the present age is, it's certainly not quite what I expected it to be. I don't know why. I expected it to be either way off or super accurate, and the reality is it's somewhere in between. It's like he's he's predicting a time that took place after him, but that time has taken place before us. That's what it feels like, and where he would get some things right and some things wrong. Overall, he's cooking. I can't say I claim to understand everything he's saying here yet, but I will say that he has a sharp instinct for what was happening during his time. And so we can embrace his thoughts. Personally, I think his thoughts on chatter and of emptiness are really, really interesting to me. I'd never read that before, but I agree so much with what he's saying. So maybe I'll clip that and put that up as a separate thing. He's just so based, you know? He's just so based in that regard. Someone comes in. I'm sorry, I don't know how to read your name, but your name is unfamiliar to me, so I think it's your first time. Welcome to the stream. Hello, fellow philosophers. I have no idea what led you all down this rabbit hole called philosophy, but since we're all here together, oh well. Yeah, it's a pit of shame here. Not everyone here is philosophically inclined, though, which I think is good. I don't want my stream to just be people who are philosophically inclined, because I think that will make you lose touch of the world. That will make me lose touch of the world. So a lot of people here have a sort of passing understanding of it, not too much. I personally am educated in it, unfortunately, which is always a terrible thing to be educated in this, because why? You know, pick a real degree, right? But whatever. That was my brief reading of Søren Kierkegaard's The Present Age. I can allow Parrot out from his shackles. He may speak for me now and read any of the comments. Parrot is my assistant who reads comments and streams sometimes when I can't read them. Though for this stream I didn't want him specifically to read them because
other philosophy people.
He interferes me like that. He hates other philosophy people. I don't hate other philosophers. I just argue with them a lot. And I do that enough in the library that I don't want to bring it upon to the streams, you know? You know what I mean? And also I think there's a degree of it that needs to be accessible and palatable to an audience that is not familiar.
Alexandria. Call me just Alex. That is just Cyrillic way of spelling it. And yes, first time here.
Cyrillic way of spelling Alex. Okay, well, welcome to the stream, Alex. I am the librarian of Alexandria, which I think bears no similarity, but nonetheless is there. And I'm going to do more philosophy and read more philosophy in the near future. That's all I need to know about me for now. Jesus, it's been 3 hours. Jeez, 3 hours and 20 minutes of me streaming. I'll keep it brief at the end because I know some people want to stay asleep for this, and if I go off too much into my decaying opinions, people might be jolted or startled. So to keep it brief, I think this text is very interesting as a sort of, as he says, it's almost like his way of prophesizing about an age through his critique of a novel that speaks of two ages. And he speaks on a lot of his common themes, like inauthenticity, excellence, heroism, God, religion, these types of things that he likes to talk about that I think are very interesting. Me personally, I think there is a great way to read Søren Kierkegaard that is not inherently super religious, And one of the advantages that one might get from a reading like that is to sort of not a divorce from the religious aspects of it, but to understand where it's coming from. I think a benefit of that is that you don't get lumped into brainless opinion pieces of people who invoke the word of God, because nowadays more than anything, people who invoke the word or the name of God don't know what the fuck they're talking about, and they're fucking idiots, right? Just like any other Twitter cesspool degenerate. Sorry, my hatred's coming out. It's my passion, okay? Excuse me. It's my passion. It's the passion. It is the passion that which he speaks about, that I speak with. But thank you for joining me for the stream. This is a good excuse for me to read this, because I've always wanted to read this, but I've never had the time to settle down to read it, because it's not quite sort of related to the compulsory stuff I kind of should be reading about, but nonetheless was something interesting. I hope I can do more streams like this, and in fact, I think I want to do one more stream like this tomorrow. I haven't quite picked the text out for that, what that would be. Maybe it could be the second half of this text, the remaining bit of the literature, or, you know, maybe something else, maybe from Kierkegaard, or maybe even something else from another thinker. Maybe we could balance the flavor out with a feminist thinker tomorrow.
Isn't arguing the main thing in philosophy?
Isn't arguing the main thing in philosophy? Arguing is the main thing that happens in philosophy, yes. But if you were, but I would have a gripe with the argument, with the proposition that argument is the end all of philosophy, right? It's the point of it is to argue, is what I would disagree with. I will say that there is a lot of argumentation in it, and it's important, but it is not the point of it. It's not the main, it may be the main thing as in the main activity, but it's certainly not the telos of it. I think the telos springs into, I think the telos is a sort of passion that springs into action, one that Kierkegaard speaks about here, which is why I'm so enamored by him and I'm reading him today, right? But yeah, passion, philosophy shouldn't just be about writing angry letters to other people and just, you know, yelling at each other in a closed room in an ivory tower. I think that's very remiss of what philosophy should be. But nonetheless, it also shouldn't just be arguing. It shouldn't be, you know, arguing with people around on Twitter or whatever, and in so-called quote-unquote arguments where there's no argumentation, it's just a yelling match. No, it shouldn't be that either. And it even shouldn't just be purely good argumentation. Because I think philosophy, engaging in philosophy is powerful and is necessary for us to sort of engage with the world meaningfully. Not just in arguments, not just in conflict, not just in synthesizing our opinions with opinions of the world and of the public, but of how we appreciate the world, of how we see it, of how we interact with it, of how we sort of engage with it, right? That is philosophical, but not necessarily argumentative, is what I would say. Anything else? Any burning concerns that anyone else has? If not, then this is a stream longer than I thought it would be. I really thought it would take me about an hour to read through this, but I forgot that reading out loud is different from reading in my head. So thanks everyone for joining me today. Very happy that you could all make it here. There will be another stream like this tomorrow, maybe. Subscribe to see more of it, I suppose. That would be good. And, well, I hope everyone has a good day. Yes, and I hope you think about this piece. If you don't think about this piece, that's fine. I hope if you're not inclined to think about what I just read today, that you're inclined to replay this VOD, you know, to fall asleep, to do something else, just to, you know, have a voice narrate some bit of philosophy and to digest it slowly, because again, there's no rush to digest this all at once. I think rushing through it is precisely a shortcoming that contemporary philosophy has. So take care, please stay safe, be close with yourself, be passionate with what you do, be intentional with what you do, and if all of these things don't click with you immediately, that's okay. Just know that that's okay, and that you have all the time in the world. Maybe not all the time, but you have some time, some leisure time to digest it and figure it out if it makes sense to you. And again, you don't have to agree with it. You can always digest it and disagree with it. For example, even here, although very minor, I still disagree with the way the brief ways he portrays women and how he very much posits a very of his time view of men, right? Like, strong men, of great men. And I think that actually does inform his philosophy like it informs his philosophy beyond his just his view on women. I think it informs his view of the great man theory being very skewed towards this perspective. And I think to counterbalance this flavor on my channel, maybe tomorrow I can read something feminist. I could maybe read a chapter of something from Simone de Beauvoir or bell hooks. I think that would be really good. That would be an interesting thing to endeavor into for tomorrow. But as of today, goodbye. Thank you. Bye everyone. Say if you're still awake, say goodbye. If you're asleep, hope you have a good night. Thank you for stopping by for the stream. I will see you all tomorrow. Goodbye. Goodbye everyone. Goodbye. And I will see you tomorrow.
New people today. Thanks again for stopping by. And I hope to see you all again.